I think we're ready. Good morning, everyone. It is 9:15 on March the 17th, and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the 72nd spring meeting of the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission. My name is Doug Boyd, Chairman, and Scott Bannon is Vice Chairman to my right. And I would like to ask everyone, if you would, when you speak, would you please say your name so that staff can get the correct person with the correct dialogue for the meeting. And I'd like to start with introductions. If we'd start with Dave to my left and go around the room to introduce yourself. Please state your name and your affiliation. Thank you.
I'm Dave Donaldson, Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission staff.
Christopher Mace, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department.
Jason Froba, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries.
Jack McGovern, NOAA Fisheries.
Glenn Constantine, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Alan Brown, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
Reed Hendon, Mississippi, Governor's Appointee.
Joe Spraggins, Mississippi Department of Marine Resources.
Chris Nelson, Bon Secours Fisheries, citizen appointment for Alabama.
Scott Bannon, Director of Alabama Marine Resources Division.
All right, thank you, everyone. We have two people on the net. Yeah. Dave, would you go ahead?
Dan and Senator, would you introduce yourself?
Dan Eleanor.
Senator Jay Luno, Louisiana Senate.
Dan
Eleanor, Florida Fish and Wildlife.
And then Senator, sorry.
Senator Jay Luno, Louisiana Senate.
Okay, next on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. And, oh, Dave, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I just, as a matter of record, I want to go over the voting procedures. Voting for any of the meetings shall be by state commissioner with one vote each for a total of 15. In the event that there's dissenting votes, each state delegation shall cast a vote, so a total of 5 votes. If there's only one commissioner from the state, then that his or her vote shall represent that state, and upon request, any commissioner can call or ask for a recess so they can caucus with their other members and for the purpose of voting on a particular issue. Mr. Chairman, we do have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Dave. Moving to item number 2, the adoption of the agenda. Do we have any additions to the agenda? I do have one. I would like to insert a break after item number 4 to give people time to go check out if you need to. Dave, did you have any?
Yeah, I had one, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to add a discussion on travel insurance under other business.
All right, with those changes, any discussion?
Make a motion, we accept the agenda with the changes.
All right, motion from General Spraggins and second by Scott. Any objection to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes. Next, we have approval of the minutes. I'm sure everyone has read them in great detail. Do we have any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, I'd move like a motion to approve the minutes.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes as written.
Thank you, Scott. Second. We have a second. Reed. Any discussion? Hearing none, motion's approved. Next on the agenda, standing committee reports. Dave, you want to?
Yeah, we'll have reports from the TCC and state federal, and we'll start with TCC, and I believe Darren Topping's here to provide that report.
Thanks, Dave.
As part of the TCC meeting yesterday, we had a general session to start off on the Fish and Wildlife Service Small Grants Program, which focuses on research of a non-indigenous invasive species. The TCC heard presentations about a USGS database used to track non-indigenous aquatic species in the U.S., the presence of and effects of salmonid whirling disease on wild freshwater trout in the southeast, silver carp populations in the Arkansas River, effects of carp diets on native riverine species, and the impacts of avian bacular myelopathy caused by cyanobacteria hydrilla. Jamie Reinhardt also provided an update on the Deepwater Horizon Fish and Water Column Invertebrate Strategic Plan, whose purpose is to guide restoration planning. The restoration team developed species prioritization process by identifying threats to injured species and associated restoration objectives. We also had a presentation by the USGS Wetland and Aquatic Research Center staff that highlighted the importance of the history of the partnership between the USGS and the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission. They provided an overview of the primary research areas they have expertise in, such as invasive species, imperiled species, ecological stressors, and restoration. They also emphasize building partnerships to increase the scope of acoustic telemetry arrays, which would enable greater detection capabilities for species of interest that have been acoustically tagged. A discussion followed their presentation, and the TCC made a motion in respect to developing a partnership with the USGS. And I believe we're going to bring this motion up. So the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission and the USGS developed a cooperative partnership to work together on shared research needs in the Gulf of Mexico. And I believe they need to act on that, Dave.
We have a committee motion from the technical committee. Doesn't need a second. Any discussion on that motion?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So I'm fully supportive of this, and you know, I guess if you could, I guess for the record a little bit, either Dave or Winnie, can you kind of paint the picture of what this cooperation might look like, what it might mean for the states?
Yeah. So the Great Lakes Commission, the Atlantic Commission, and the Pacific Commission all have similar agreements. The Atlantic Commission was the latest to enter to an agreement with USGS. So USGS approached us end of last year. We've had several conversations about research needs that aren't being addressed. And we were looking for commonalities of things that we would like to see get accomplished, and things that the USGS activities USGS are doing where we can complement each other and help each other out. So there were several. We developed a white paper and shared that with the agency. One of the main focuses was a lot of the tagging information that Steve's doing. That seems to be kind of low-hanging fruit, and one of the first areas we're going to work on. But we also identified habitat mapping, habitat classification would be another. Invasive species is a big one as well. So we will work on those areas and provide an update to the commission as we move forward. So and we can share that white paper with the commission just to show some of the areas that were identified and provided to the USGS.
So one follow-up, Dave, is the big question room. So will there be any dollars attached to that cooperation with USGS that'll funnel out to? Again, we're super supportive, especially the tagging and some other things. But I just wondered, will there be any financial funding?
No, the product would be the actual, them doing some of the research and sharing it, and developing those partnerships between USGS and the states. They've got a good relationship with their federal partners, but they'd like to expand that to the states. So their main goal is to make sure that the research that they're doing is, they're not doing research just for the sake of doing research. That it actually has some benefit to the management of the resources in the Gulf of Mexico. And by expanding that partnership with the state, they're hoping to be more strategic and provide cooperation. So, but yeah, that still remains to be seen. But probably not. It would be stuff that they would do, but we'd be able to have input and share on with those results. So.
So the motion's still up there, and I don't know if you need to take action on that.
Yeah, we need a motion from the commission to essentially accept this motion from the TCC. And as I mentioned to the TCC, I just wanted to make the commission aware that this is what our plan is, and make sure that there's not any opposition to us moving forward with this. But we will certainly keep you apprised of the progress and the areas that we're going to be working on.
Okay, we do have a motion on the board.
Motion forward.
Yeah, it was actually Scott made the motion already, correct?
Well, the motion came from the committee, right?
I thought, yeah.
Yeah, I think the point of order is that we have a motion from a committee, so it doesn't require a second. So we had discussion. So now I think we just need to.
Yeah, we just need to vote.
Correct.
All right. Is there any opposition to the motion? Hearing none, motion's approved.
Thank you. As in previous meetings, we had Mike Salata update us on the group on the progress BOEM has made with regards to renewable wind energy leasing in the Gulf. He addressed some of the major FAQs received during the comment period and discussed next steps in the leasing process for the Gulf. Next, Steve Vanderkoy gave the IJF updates. He provided an overview of the SURF funding for the 2022 projects. All states did start with a base funding of $194,960, but then some states moved unspent funds from 2021 into 2022 awards. Next year's funding has not been determined, but it will be likely to be more than this previous year. He is hoping to finalize the red drum profile as well by October 2022, and a task force will soon be established to start working on a profile for mangrove snapper. Jeff Ruster gave us an update on the CARES Act program, and looks like it's so far distributed over $26 million to the approved applicants in the Gulf states. And I believe Jeff will provide additional details on the status of the CARES program in a later portion of this meeting today. There are some subcommittee reports provided to the TCC, and they started off with the Artificial Reef Group subcommittee. The Atlantic and Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commissions are planning to hold a joint Artificial Reef Subcommittee meeting in person sometime this summer. Agenda topics they plan to discuss during this meeting include wind farms, Gulf Atlantic artificial reef footprint estimations, socioeconomic benefits, biological opinions, and sea turtle entrapment and entanglement issues, damage of reef modules from hurricanes and commercial fishing, eDNA monitoring, rig decommissioning due to bankruptcy. In the crab subcommittee, they heard a presentation on predator and habitat impacts to blue crab populations. States gave updates on terrapin work related to bycatch reduction devices and updates on landings and fishery independent monitoring. And during other business, alternative gears for harvesting recreational blue crabs were discussed. In the Gulf Fin Committee, the Fin Committee began by discussing the Gulf Fin data storage and dissemination of state survey data. Federal partners would like to access this data via Gulf Fin, but some states are not currently doing this and would need to consider this process. Other considerations need to be made concerning short-term and long-term data availability, and a working group may need to be developed to determine the best way to handle this. The same working group may also be tasked with reviewing and updating the MRIP recreational or MRIP regional implementation plan, which is out of date. A motion came out of the Fin Committee. The TCC passed the following motion. Joe's going to put up there. The TCC recommends that the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission send a letter to the Southeast Fisheries Science Center requesting they present to the TCC the verification process of the bycatch of state-managed priority species in the Shrimp Observer Bycatch Program.
All right, we have a motion from committee. No second is needed. Discussion. Hearing no discussion. Is anyone opposed to the motion? Hearing none, motion passes.
Thank you. The Fin Committee also considered funding priorities for 2023 and decided to include all ongoing tasks as high priority for the inclusion in the 2023 Fin Cooperative Agreement. The committee also included biological sampling as a high priority since its funding is set to run out in December of 2022. The TCC then passed the following motion. The TCC moves to include all ongoing Gulf Fin tasks, coordination and administration of fin activities, collecting, managing, and disseminating marine recreational fisheries data, operation of fin data management system, certificate program, and reinstating biological sampling for age structures and links as high priority funding items for 2023.
Again, we have a committee motion. Need no second. Discussion. No discussion. Any opposition to the motion? Hearing none. Motion's approved.
Thank you. In the Mollusk and Shellfish Subcommittee, they learned about a database summarizing oyster restoration projects funded by Deepwater Horizon funds. They discussed impacts from hurricanes to oyster aquaculture farms, which have been significant in recent years. They also covered oyster shell recycling programs, oyster management plans, and oyster restoration activities within each of the states. Remote setting hatchery facilities are being used by most states to supplement restoration. In the Cmap Subcommittee, members discussed ongoing surveys and how they can be optimized to make them more cost efficient. They anticipate 2022 surveys to take place as normal. Members debated on whether vertical online sampling should continue based on concerns about how the data is or isn't being used. The TCC passed the following motion made originally in Cmap Subcommittee, and the TCC approves this motion made by Cmap to ask the Commission to provide a resolution in honor of Thomas Vandervinder, the recognition of his efforts towards Mississippi fisheries resources over the course of his career.
Okay, we have a committee motion. Any discussion? Scott?
So, Dave, if you could help me out, who would we present this to and when would we try and do this?
During the Cmap subcommittee, they talked about presenting this at the upcoming October meeting, and it would be a resolution that the commission would pass. And I don't know who it actually would who we would present it to. Jill, can you? What was the thinking? We'll switch.
Steve Vanderkooi obviously set that up.
Jill mentioned, he does have a family member who we would reach out to, but another option would be to have Harriet very accepted. Thank you.
We'll work out those details.
Any further discussion on the motion? Any opposition to the motion? Hearing none, motion's approved.
Thank you. The TCC also had a discussion on the election of officers. That was a continued discussion from the previous meeting. And the TCC passed the following motion. We passed the motion to defer the election of officers, the TCC, until October meeting, and revisited on an annual basis.
Okay, commission has a motion on the board. Any discussion? Dave?
I will point out later agenda item when we're talking about future meetings of the commission, we will be talking about election of officers, not just for the commission, but for other committees. So we will address. I think we still need. It's okay to pass this, but we've got a path forward in terms of election of officers.
Any other discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Hearing none, motion's approved.
And that concludes my report.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Reed?
So you mentioned from the Cmap Subcommittee report, looking at current surveys, continuing those or not. Are y'all getting any, is the commission or the subcommittees getting any input from the management councils or NOAA on the value of the data and recommendations for which surveys need to continue, possibly be modified?
I mean, Jeff Resser might answer this better, but I feel like there are probably some internal discussions, and some people have a better feeling of what's coming down from the council, and but not only everybody on the subcommittee has that information. But I guess yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
All right, Darren, thank you. Next on the agenda is Menhaden Advisory Committee. Trevor?
Thank you. The MAC met Tuesday with several members in person. There were no actions or motions to consider. The first item we covered was a review of the 2021 Gulf Menhaden season and a forecast of the 2022 season. Ray Rock presented the landings for 2021. The total landings were approximately 360,000 metric tons, which is a decline of 12.9% compared to the previous year and 24% lower than the 5-year average. Some reasons for this were the 6 named tropical systems, which contributed to low effort early and late in the season that were identified. 29 vessels fished in 2021, along with 5 run boats to improve the efficiency in transporting catches back to the factories. The current NOAA forecast for 2022 is 387,000 metric tons based on the fishing in 2021. We also had a discussion about reviewing the forecast model, making improvements and adding in some variables to try to improve the accuracy for industry to be able to use that forecast a little bit more readily. We also had a discussion on the Atlantic fishery season. The TAC for that fishery was reduced slightly to 194,000 metric tons coastwide, and they're beginning their next assessment. Jason Adrians provided an update on the Louisiana Index of Abundance for the Seine, Gillnet, and trawl projects from their fishery independent sampling. And while there is some variability year to year, the trend is generally stable on all the indices since the mid-2000s. This report is available through the Commission website. We also had an update on port sampling. So Ray Marock and Steve Vanderkoy are going to meet with industry and coordinate port sampling for this upcoming year to make sure they can get the samples to be able to have the age structures and everything else. We had an update from industry on the marine stewardship certification process. Peter Himchak from Omega indicated that they were undergoing their first surveillance audit for the MSC certification process, and I believe they're waiting on the findings from that first surveillance audit. Francois Patel from Daybrook indicated the results of the turtle observer pilot that the industry was assisting with. It was determined that drone observation did not work well, nor did moving observers from the remote vessel to the steamer to view pump out. The camera systems that they placed on board didn't seem to identify the targets which were deployed. They were essentially effigies of turtles, so they didn't have any turtles to identify in the test. And the system was able to identify those foam turtles that were randomly released into the net. There should be more to come on this one as they move through that process. And the last thing in other business, Jason Adrians from Louisiana indicated they'll be releasing an RFP later this spring on a bycatch study of the reduction fleet. This is not released to the public yet, and when it is, it will be forwarded on to the commission to be able to review and look at. And that completes the report for the MAC.
Thank you, Trevor. We inserted a break at this point. We're moving awfully fast. If it's okay, we could just continue unless somebody does need a break at this point. Can I get a nod of heads to continue? Is that all right, everybody? Okay, we'll just continue at this point. Dave?
Before we go on, I failed to mention under the TCC, Darren mentioned the invasive species general session, and there will be a kind of a meeting summary, a briefing document that will be, we produce those documents for each of the general sessions we do, and that'll be available on our website in the near future, just FYI. I just want to let everybody know that.
Okay, next on the agenda, number 5, Sea Grant Fisheries Extension Meeting Report. Laura?
Morning, everybody. I hope everyone's doing well. The Sea Grant Fisheries Extension Advisory Committee met yesterday afternoon. We had state reports from each of the programs with some updates on some of our regional projects. For Mississippi, Alabama, their highlight projects, they have been working on an Eat Local Seafood campaign for Mississippi, Alabama. They've been producing a video which will be released in April to help promote local seafood in Mississippi, Alabama. They have 2 Sea Grant funded research projects for fisheries, and one of them is for Zach Darnell on blue crab mortality. The other one is for Ronnie Baker, and I apologize, I know it's on acoustic telemetry, but I did not write down the species, so my bad. But you could follow up with Marcus on that. And then they are running 3 regional projects, the first of which is a NOAA Restore grant for characterization of depredation in the reef fish fishery. They have a stakeholder workshop coming up on April 4th in conjunction with the council meeting in Alabama. They've got 25 fishermen participating to help provide some characterization of depredation. That will be based on a study that's been done of both commercial, recreational, for-hire fishermen as a survey over the last couple of months. And so this is kind of a culmination of, looking at those survey results and building some mental models and maps out of that. They also have a Gulf States funded project on depredation in relation to descender devices. On that project, they have 30 charter captains who've committed to collecting data for this. They have sent out all the kits. They are halfway through training the captains, and data collection for that will be occurring from April through September. to determine depredation rates with descending devices. And then the third is that Mississippi, Alabama is leading a regional reef fish extension program that is a collaboration between all of the Gulf states and South Atlantic programs. And that program kicked off this year. We're working on a stakeholder advisory panel for that group, which will meet in fall, potentially in conjunction with the Gulf states meeting. Mississippi, Alabama held their first class of fishes, training fishermen on local ecological science knowledge and responsible fishing practices. They certified 12 people in that program. For Florida, they are in their 4th year now of their Florida Friendly Fishing Guide program, which is going well. It's going so well that there was a request in a partnership with Florida to now create a separate division of that, which is the Florida Friendly Angler for private anglers. They are leading the Return 'em Right program regionally to distribute descending devices and provide barotrauma education Gulf-wide. The CFE program is a program with EdCamp doing county-level reports of economics of both recreational and commercial fisheries. They're in the process of building a map that would allow you to click on individual counties. That'll be a website developed so that you can look at both recreational and commercial value economics for each county. That program is open to other states as well. For the recreational information, it is based on MRIP data. So for the states that aren't using MRIP, that will be a little bit more challenging to figure out how to try to move forward on that. And Goliath Grouper, they have a new research project for the next 2 years on developing best practices for catch and release. And the Goliath Grouper count, the 13th annual, is coming up in June. They are looking for additional people to participate Gulf-wide as we're seeing an expansion in range of Goliath Grouper. And they have a harvest internship program in which they have students that are interns for the university that are supported to work in aquaculture facilities. So this summer they'll be accepting 3 or 4 more students to work through that program. It's been very successful the last few years. And that application is open now. And they have also developed a NOAA Fisheries Finance Program calculator for the IFQ fishery, which is now posted on their website to assist in folks who are interested in applying for the NOAA loan program for quota and using the quota as collateral on that loan program. So that calculator will assist in valuing that quota. In Louisiana, Louisiana has seen an expansion of their seafood market in Plaquemines despite COVID and hurricanes and everything else, and now has 3 locations, and fishermen are reporting that they see a 48% increase in profit through the market as opposed to their traditional pathways of product. They have a mangrove project, which is NSF funded, in which they're collecting propagules, and high school students are actually raising those and going out and doing plantings. And they have twice a year Science Saturday programs with a series of education around that for K through 12 students. They're doing a reboot of their Harbor of Refuge survey as given all of the impacts of hurricanes that they have had. They're still working closely with their commercial fleets to try to improve safety and harbor for their fleets during hurricane events. There are 2 open positions in Louisiana Sea Grant right now for a fishery specialist to replace Julie Lively, who stepped up as director, so her fishery specialist position opened up, as well as a water quality specialist. And the Louisiana Fisheries Forward Summit, which was scheduled for this March of this year, was canceled due to the impacts from Ida and the status of the industry right now. It has been moved till next year, so it will be March 1st, 2023. And they are expecting the 2019 Bonnet-Carré spillway money to be coming soon, so that's going to be a big priority on their plate. And they have recently released a hurricane report in conjunction with some partners on impacts to the seafood industry from the past 4 storms of the last 2 years. That economic impact was $579.9 million to the seafood industry. 70% of that was from Hurricane Ida. And they have also recently released their AOC grants, the Alternative Oyster Aquaculture Grant Program. They have approved 4 nursery grants and 2 grow out farm grants. In Texas, we heard some from our agent down in South Texas on the continued development of the Bahia Grande that's in some final stages of additional flooding in that area and creating additional habitat and wetlands. Some issues regarding SpaceX and impacts to the wildlife refuge down there and impacts to blocking beach access. And their next stage of rocket launch is actually delayed due to waiting on approvals for EISs and things. Illegal fishing activities are continuing across the border, and that's been a big issue continually down in South Texas. It has actually led to the U.S. determining that fishing vessels in Texas cannot, or fishing vessels from Mexico cannot access U.S. ports. As a means of trying to put some pressure on Mexico. That has had, unfortunately, a negative effect on the harbor of Brownsville, right across the border there, though, which actually does service a lot of Mexican fishing vessels in the area. And so it has had a negative economic impact down there due to some of the legal fishing vessels that do come and utilize services, shipyard services, fuel, things like that in Brownsville. So they've had a bit of an issue there. Oyster mariculture, we're excited about the fact that we have two farms up and running now. We have a third that was approved this week and is in the final permit process. So we have one in Galveston area, we have one in Copano, we now have one that'll be coming online in Matagorda Bay out of Palacios. There are 4 more permits in process that are moving quickly, and we have another series of workshops coming up for some more farmer education. We have the Oyster aquaculture business specialist from Mississippi, Alabama is going to be coming over and doing a series of workshops with us. On the recreational side, we have created a series of publications. We have a publication out that just recently was released on angler ethics and etiquette. This stemmed from a lot of COVID issues where we were seeing increases in recreational fishing, and we heard from both our guides and the recreational fishing industry that there were a lot of user conflict issues and etiquette issues. And so we have created the Angler Ethics and Etiquette Guide. We have a publication coming out in April, which will be on sustainable recreational fishing practices, just and environmentally practices recommendations for recreational fishing. And in May, we're looking to release Fishing Guide 101 on not only what's required, but what are best practices as a fishing guide if you're interested in getting in the business. We've also seen an increase in fishing guides and the numbers of permits going up. So that has been on that side, and we are also hosting our first Weighmaster training program where we'll be training folks to be able to work weigh stations at tournaments since we have such a high number of tournaments in Texas. So that first training will be in May. We've been doing a series of safety trainings with the shrimp fleet and a series of public meetings. And we have 2 regional projects in collaboration with Louisiana that we have mentioned before. One is a research project on TEDS looking at smaller bar spacing to reduce the mortality of smaller sea turtles. That project has a stakeholder working group now that was facilitated by Sea Grant to help advise the project, and they've been doing a series of public meetings around the Gulf to inform the industry. And there's a bycatch reduction device project funded through Deepwater Horizon that we are collaborating with NOAA on. We similarly have a stakeholder working group that is helping to advise on some of the designs for that project. We have done what we call the bird hunt across the Gulf. We did 75 boats in Texas recently looking at new bycatch gear, additional devices that are being used. And we are planning to see testing of at least a couple of new bycatch devices on NOAA vessels this summer, and then onto some initial pilot commercial vessels in the fall. And that's more than enough, I think, for you all to absorb. So, end of report. Thanks all.
Thank you, Laura. Question? Scott?
Wow, that was a lot.
Sorry. We've been busy at Sea Grant.
No, I feel bad that I missed the meeting because I probably have like dozens of questions, but I want to narrow it down to a couple. So the fish descending, the predation project, is that using cameras? They're just going to follow that down and watch it and provide that back to you guys. So I think everybody's excited to hear about that. the fishing etiquette guide, is that a Texas thing or did y'all do that nationally?
So, I mean, it is a Texas guide, but there's nothing sort of specifically Texas about it. It's, I'd have to look at it, but it's nothing really specific to, I think there's a few things perhaps Texas regulation related that we may have mentioned, but I'm happy to send it your way. And, you know, we're happy to also, if it's beneficial to tweak it, we could always tweak it, make it more accessible.
Yeah, I think if it's kind of a generic thing, I mean, I think I would share it at our site as well. I mean, anything that helps smooth things at the ramp and on the reefs, it would be helpful. And gosh, I had a lot more questions, but I'll probably hit you up later. But thank you for that.
I'll stick around for a while, so. Yeah. Anything else?
Any other questions or comments? Dave? Oh, I'm sorry, Chris.
Laura, I raised an issue about the Texas oyster fishery that I realized was probably more germane to the discussion of the mollusk and shellfish subcommittee of the TCC, but we did have a discussion, and I wanted you to tell people, and I'll do what I can to explain the significance of it across the Gulf.
Sure. Sorry, Chris. I know it's there's so many things on the list. Yes, Chris raised some discussion on the potential upcoming closures for the oyster fishery in Texas and the impacts that that's having throughout the supply chain across the Gulf. You know, Texas is one of the most significant wild harvest fisheries at this point and supply for wild oysters. We talked a bit about the possibility of trying to coordinate and host a meeting collaboratively with all parties, since there are obviously some very diverse folks that are on different sides of this issue. So the potential perhaps for Sea Grant to try to facilitate a meeting between both the commercial industry, the recreational industry, and management, and the possibility of trying to talk further about what some of the public reef management in Texas looks like, as there are some concerns about the fact that these reef closures that are up for discussion or up for vote at the commission next week in Texas are permanent closures. And the concern of, you know, the continual trend now that we're seeing, we had several bays that were permanently closed. Now we have 3 more reefs that are permanently closed, and what that sort of means long-term for the oyster fishery, and how we're going to maintain sustainable oyster harvest in Texas. What other options are there? Potentially alternative gears, you know, alternative methods of harvest. So does that sum it up for the moment?
Yeah, that's excellent. And I guess I just wanted to add, I'm not raising this in an effort to debate or discuss the merits of the Texas proposal. I'm raising it to point out to the commissioners that this is a very important issue Gulf-wide, and Texas is just part of the whole challenge. And the issue really is the management of public oyster fisheries on the Gulf, and it actually would apply to the way they're being managed in the Mid-Atlantic. There's still some public oyster fisheries. There is a public oyster fishery in Virginia and one in Maryland, and they face similar challenges. And so I think it's something that, as far as the Gulf situation, Alabama, Mississippi, Florida, Louisiana, and Texas all face similar challenges for their public oyster fisheries, and I think it's an ideal opportunity for the commission to play a role in that. And I raised it to Sea Grant as well, because they typically play a role in helping user groups come to grips with, you know, user group conflicts. And that's not all this is, but that's part of it. I don't have a specific recommendation. I just wanted to make the commissioners aware of what was going on. And the impact on the oyster industry is just that when Texas has poor oyster harvest from its public resource, it affects people in the oyster industry from Texas all the way up the eastern seaboard to Virginia or Maryland. And it's a big deal. The oyster industry depends on each and every state. We used to talk about the I-10 corridor as being the oyster highway on the Gulf Coast. Is when Texas has oysters and Florida needs them, they get trucked to Florida. When Florida had a harvest in Apalachicola, a lot of those oysters got used in Texas. So thank you. Thanks for your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you for those comments. Any other comments, questions? Dave?
I just got a comment. I just want to thank Laura and her group for continuing to work with us. A number of years ago, Ralph Rayburn suggested that Sea Grant meet in conjunction with the commission meeting. I think it's been a good partnership, and we appreciate you coming to the meeting, interacting with us, and providing us an update on your discussions. As we talked about, I apologize for not getting into your meeting. That was one benefit of COVID, is I was actually able to participate virtually because I could literally be in multiple places at the same time because I had multiple screens. But one of the drawbacks of in-person is I can only be in one place at a time. But I just wanted to thank you guys and appreciate the update.
Yeah, I'd just like to say Chris and I sat in on that meeting yesterday, and it was very informative. Very well-run meeting, too. So thank you, Laura.
Thank you all. Thank you for continuing to have us, since we appreciate you being hosted and the opportunity to come and be part of this as well.
All right, next on the agenda is number 6, NOAA Fisheries. Jack, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me, Mr. Chairman, and Dave, thank you for the wonderful breakfast. I'm sitting in for Andy Strelchuk. His wife's birthday is St. Patrick's Day, so he tries to take that day off every year. My role is I oversee the Sustainable Fisheries Division at the Southeast Regional Office, and we work with the Gulf Council, South Atlantic, and the Caribbean Council to develop amendments to fishery management plans and implement those regulations. So I have a few updates for y'all today. One update is a personnel issue. As you know, Roy Crabtree retired last year, and Andy Strelchuk became the regional administrator. He was the deputy regional administrator, and last week we named his replacement. That's Kim Amendola, and she's now my boss. And she has been the head of the communications at CIRA for quite a while. So she's going to do a very good job. I'll start off with red snapper. I expect that we will be announcing the federal for-hire season fairly soon, and that the length is probably going to be very similar to what it was last week. We're working on rulemaking for 2 red snapper framework amendments that were approved by the Gulf Council, and these would increase the catch limits and also calibrate the state surveys. And then last week, the Gulf Council's Scientific and Statistical Committee met, and they got an update on the great red snapper count, and they provided new catch level recommendations, which is an increase over their previous recommendations, and that will go to the Gulf Council in 2 weeks, and they'll discuss any action to change the catch limits, so some sort of framework amendment or something like that. Other rulemakings that we have going on or completed, lane snapper in December, we implemented regulations that increased the catch limit from about 300,000 pounds to 1 million pounds, over 1 million pounds, and modified the accountability measures so that we'll close harvest when the catch limit is expected to be reached. The Descend Act became effective on January 13th. It requires a person's commercial for hire or private recreational vessels to have a venting tool or descending device rigged and ready to use when fishing for reef species in the Gulf federal waters. And we published a final rule on January 14th to clarify the definitions of descending device and venting tool. We're working on a proposed rule for cobia. This is Reef Fish Amendment 32 that was approved by the Gulf Council, and this is going to modify the catch limit, size limit, and possession limits. And And that amendment was approved by the Gulf Council in January and submitted in February. And we're working on two actions, rulemaking actions for red grouper. One is based on Reef Fish Amendment 53 that would change the sector allocations and would reduce the catch levels. And that's based on a new assessment that used the Fishing Effort Service data from MRIP. And then there's a subsequent framework action that would then increase the catch limits for red grouper, and that's based on an interim analysis done by the Science Center that shows that the stock is that is rebuilt some. The Gulf Council meeting is in Gulf Shores, Alabama in 2 weeks, and they're going to take final action. They're scheduled to take final action on two amendments. One's historical captain conversions, and this would provide the opportunity for 3 remaining eligible individuals to replace their historical captain permits with standard for hire permits. And then they're going to take final action on mackerel amendment 34, and this is for Atlantic king mackerel to change the catch limit and allocations. But because the mackerel FMP is shared by the Gulf and the South Atlantic, for a plan amendment, the Gulf Council also has to take action on that. There are a number of ongoing actions by the Gulf Council. There's the shrimp electronic logbook, the shrimp electronic logbook units that were used to collect shrimp effort data ceased transmitting to NOAA Fisheries at the end of 2020, and the Gulf Council is developing a draft framework action to modify the shrimp FMP to address the expiration of the 3G cellular units, and they're discussing this, and they'll probably discuss this again at their June meeting. We're also working on amendments for gag and greater amberjack. Recent stock assessments show that they're not in good shape and they're undergoing overfishing, and they're overfished, and so they'll be discussing that at their next meeting. And they're also working on 2 actions for Gulf king mackerel, and this is a species that's in good shape, and they have a plan amendment to change the sector allocations and then a framework amendment to increase the catch levels. With regard to our electronic for hire sea fire program, I think Jessica Stephen provided an update to the commission earlier this week. We're entering phase 2 of that, which is a requirement for the positioning satellite or cellular VMS units, and we're updating FAQs, and we're working with fishermen to improve compliance. And we've also been working with Greg Gray to move money over to the Gulf States Commission to support the dockside survey. One last thing that I'll mention is fishery disasters. I have an update from our grants group, Kelly Donnelly. She indicates that for the Bonnet-Carré disaster, sped plans from Alabama and Mississippi were sent to headquarters, our headquarters, for review and submission to OMB. The Louisiana plan is undergoing technical review. And there's a couple for the South Atlantic too, but I won't mention those. And that completes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jack. Any questions at this point, General?
Yeah, thank y'all very much for what you're doing. Any update on OMB? Are they going to release any of that, the Bonnet-Carré? Have you got anything with it?
I don't know, General, and I can follow up and ask our grants.
Yeah, 'cause I know y'all have had it there almost a year as far as, NOAA had the stuff there for us, and I'm not sure about Alabama, pretty close, I think. And, but it's been sitting at OMB the whole time, and I'm just curious if there's any update on it. Thank you very much.
I'll follow up on that.
I think I had Reed next. Do you have your hand up, Reed? Okay. Scott?
Jack, I want to say the same thing. The NOAA staff getting the Bonnet-Carré, the flood money was excellent, was very, very fast in relative speak. It seems like things get bogged down a lot. And so please pass that on. We do appreciate their efforts. We realize that it's been bogged down in OMB. But I like to blame you guys for a lot of things, but in that particular thing, you guys did a great job, and it was very efficient. And I just want to make sure I said thank you.
Any other questions for Jack? Yes, sir.
Yeah, and also with the CARES Act funds, y'all were pretty quick with that, and we appreciate that. I mean, y'all had in a year time, you did it twice, I believe is what it was. And that really helped our fishermen and a lot of our processors enough to be able to continue operating. Thank you very much.
Thanks, General.
Any other questions? Jack, thank you for that report. Next on the agenda, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Alan and Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think at this point, we'll wait for specific comments when we give the budget updates, if that's all right.
Okay, that's fine. Next on the agenda then is the Gulf States Program reports. Steve, you want to start?
Yeah, it's either Noah is going to go or we can go first at that item number 7.
Brian.
Or 8.
Brian's going to go first.
Okay, Brian, are you there?
Yes, I am. Can everyone hear me okay?
Oh, okay. Yep.
Yeah, appreciate it. Can you guys give me a rough idea? I guess everyone in the room can hear me and see me, or are they just able to hear me? I just want to make sure what kind of what I'm speaking to. Thanks. You guys all ready for me to go?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can you give me a rough idea? What were the time you wanted me to cover this material? How much time did you want to give to this?
15, 20 minutes.
Okay, that's about what I planned. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for inviting me. Sorry I can't be there with you. Hopefully we're at the end of having to do things remote, but at least gives me an opportunity to talk to you today. And thank you for Joe for running through the slides. I'll do a broad overview here, kind of just big picture where we are. Obviously at the headquarters level, not maybe into some of the details and specifics that the Southeast Region Center folks can give you, but give you a big picture where we are and talk about some of the implications for Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission as members here. But if you want to move on to slide 2, please. So broad overview, just where we are in the budget process, because it can be convoluted and confusing. So we are halfway through FY22. We just saw the end of our 4th short-term CR, or continuing resolution. So we just had a FY22 budget signed by the president, I think maybe Tuesday or Wednesday. Again, fiscal year starts in October, but we're just now getting a solid look at what our money is literally 2 days ago. For the remainder of the year, and we've been working on continuing resolutions up till now. FY23, that budget usually has come out, announced, and communicated with everyone early February. We're still waiting on exact time frame that FY23 might come out, but we're looking probably here late March. I'll be surprised if it goes into April. Everything just got backed up in the budgeting process. Given delay in FY22 enacted budget, a lot of the discussion on the infrastructure bills, which I'll reference here a bit, and Build Back Better bills, which I think is most of you following the budget or the fiscal climate. Build Back Better has not gone anywhere, but infrastructure did. In FY24, we're also just getting ready to start planning FY24. We're still at the time of year through the summer that we would lay out needs and requirements for the future out years and preparing that budget. So if you go down to slide 3. So slide 3 depicts where we've landed here in FY22 on our discretionary accounts or our base budget. Can get the kind of terminology that get kind of technical, but basically our core kind of foundational base budget. We have a president's budget request of 1.1 billion. We got enacted just slightly over $1 billion. The increase in that second row there. Good news there is we do have an increase above enacted. You see that about 50, just north of $50 million increase above enacted. Good news also is that we have up to $30 million almost of programmatic increases, and I'll highlight what a few of those are here. One piece here that if you were following our budget, and depending how closely you follow our budget, the FY22 President's budget request, so the amount we were asking Congress for, it was about $100 million increase over enacted. So you see here in the second row, the President's budget request of $134 billion increase. We did not get there. There's a lot of hopes and energy put behind that. That request focused on restoration and resiliency, coastal restoration resiliency, climate-ready fisheries, a lot of focus on responding to offshore wind energy needs. A lot of funding in there that would have been new and new priorities for this current administration. Didn't quite get there in FY22, but we still are quite happy to see at least increase in budget. It's not a flat budget, and what this $51 million here enacted, sorry, $51 million enacted above our FY21 budget. That's a decent reflection of support for our programs from Congress, and there's about $20 million of that enacted budget that are ATBs, or adjustments to base, which has been a challenge for us in fisheries. I'm sure it's a challenge for the Commission and you all, that your core budget just doesn't go as far as the years and inflation goes on. So we did receive a significant bump in our adjustments to base here for this budget. So good news story here is the bottom line, but pretty far off from the President's budget request for a lot of new activity and a lot of new priorities of this administration. You can jump to slide 4. Thank you. Just graphically, a big outline of where we split our funding across our 4 main primary activities of protected resources management, fishery science and management, enforcement, and habitat conservation. This is just a visual, kind of give you a graph of where it lays out within our budget and the priorities within our budget. Won't go into too much detail here, other than flagging in our protected resources realm there. You see quite a big jump and increase in the FY22 enacted budget. And this is where we have a targeted increase of $16 million toward North Atlantic right whale management. So really looking there at how the industry and how we can help to support the industry in dealing with Atlantic large whale take reduction plan rule. So that's some of the targeted increase there. We also have a bit of increase in our fishery science and management realm to help us address with the wind proposals and the offshore wind development that is going off largely right now and most focused in New England and Northeast. So slide 5. Slide 5, obviously most directly related to the commission here and potentially its members. Our regional councils and fisheries commissions line here, as reflected here in the bold top line here. This is our budget line. This is where the Congress appropriates our money. It encompasses a number of things in that budget line. I think just as you follow that bolded black line there, regional councils, fisheries commissions, follow that around to the past different years from 20 on to 22. Again, good news, we are getting increases. We are seeing the budget at least sustained. That's always better than decreases. You could argue these costs, these increases are just covering costs of inflation, but they are increases, and that's positive. If you see down into the table there, into the kind of details of the table, obviously a big chunk of that money goes to the regional fisheries management councils, the 8 councils we work with on the federal level across the nation. But if you get down here to the fish commissions and the work where we end up providing support for the Gulf States Marine Fish Commissions, we also have some modest increases across the board there. So that's generally good news. Slide 6, please. Now I'll just be really quick on this. This is more if you really want to get in the weeds of budgeting and what you have. I've heard a couple people already mention, thanks for trying to move money as fast as we can. We've had challenges with that in the past years. I think we've done pretty well on that in the current years. This just outlines, once we get the appropriation, there are a lot of steps to getting the money approved by OMB for us to spend, then us getting that money allocated out to the field and actually then awarded through grants. There's many steps in the process. It sounds like just from the last conversation, everyone appreciates that and understands that, but I just flag it here. Just when we get an active budget, it does take some time to get that money out the door. We understand that can be challenges for you all. Jump down to slide 7. little more specific on where we landed FY22 to the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission and what we plan for the year. I think we are soon close to obligating the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission funding for 22, the portion that we were allowed to obligate before an enacted budget. So that was, again, under the continuing resolution. Without an enacted budget, this 750K should be obligating in the next few days. The remainder of the funds for FY22, again, I think we're right about level funded for the commission here for past years. Once we get an apportionment, once we get all the approvals for the spending, as was outlined in that last slide, we'll be getting that money out to the commission as fast as we can. Slide 8. Thank you. Slide 8, really just a summary slide here without going into the details of each one of these, at least at the programmatic level. I'm not familiar with all the details on the programmatic side, but on the budgeting side of these, our FY22 budget will allow us to maintain really funding levels at all these programs as they were passed. So there's no cuts, no expected major reductions. Have to figure out the details of the budgeting as the different assessments from Congress, different assessments from NOAA might be in play. But I expect these programs, based on the 22 enacted, will allow us to maintain the funding we've had in past years. And that's just, I think, the key core programs that you're all most interested in and most partner with us on. Slide 9. Again, really kind of programmatic specifics here that you guys will know a whole lot more about than I will. A great level of detail and probably work on these things every day. But here, just cutting out and flagging for you that there is specific language in the FY22 Appropriations Bill addressing red snapper. It speaks specifically to delaying implementation of state-specific calibration until 2023. It's also asking us, NOAA Fisheries, to continue work, because I think we had the same language last year, with non-governmental entity to assess whether MRIP or the catch data programs administered by the Gulf States, or you all here, provide the best estimates for recreational red snapper catch. And so this is really language, summary of the language that's in the bill that we'll have to make sure we're complying with, following through. And I think it's largely a continuation of language we've had in past years and probably all program elements that you are all deep in the weeds of working through. Slide 10. Thank you. Slide 10, this is just breaking out our what we call detailed PPAs here. This is really budget lines, or where we receive our funding. Again, not necessarily specific to anything in the Gulf States here, but our overall programmatic funding in our big bins or big budget lines here. So again, largely good news, because at least we're getting some increases or at least remaining level. Big note for the first one, expand annual stock assessments. You'll see from FY21 enacted to FY22 enacted, a fairly significant increase. We did get an $8 million increase to make sure we maintain historic survey levels and prioritize efforts to mitigate impacts of scientific surveys on from the wind development in the East Coast. So good news there. Cmap is largely probably one you're focused on, largely remaining level. And again, just flagging here for kind of comparison, that middle column, we had some quite a bit increases in requests that didn't get funded, but we still did get some increase. So slide 11. So the Infrastructure Investments Jobs Act, or IIJA as we've been referring to it, we've received significant funding in this bill. I don't know how much folks have been following that yet, but the funding totals in this table here are over a 5-year period. So this bill is already approved. Funding has already been appropriated, but the money is only coming to us yearly over a 5-year period. So these amounts are roughly, divided by 5 for each year that we have to expend these funds. Habitat restoration, that will be almost exclusively a grants program, a competitive grants program. We are working on notice of funding opportunities and working with the administration to get those competitive announcement out there. We're thinking that's probably going to be much later in the fiscal year where we see that announcement and folks will compete for that money. Again, on an annual basis, that's close to $100 million a year for the habitat restoration components. Consultations, that is meant to be funding retained internally toward NOAA Fisheries to deal with our regulatory requirements under ESA and Marine Mammal Protection Act. That'll again result in $400 million, or sorry, 400 million. Geez, that'd be great if it's 400 million. $4 million annually. Other place where we've seen quite a significant increase in interest from Congress is making sure we work on fish passage and dam removal. This is nationwide opportunities for dam removal. Again, competitive funding opportunities that we're working on developing, but probably won't see those notice of funding opportunities out till a little later in the year. We're hoping spring, summer to at least have the award announcements out there so we can start doing the competitive process. And a slight bump to our Pacific Coastal Salmon Recovery Fund, which obviously is not prime interest of you all here. Slide 12, and I'll be quick to hurry up here because I keep within my time. This is just a breakdown of Gulf of Mexico State agency awards, so awards from NOAA Fisheries to the states. It can seem a bit lumpy here, and it might not cover all of the funding you receive, maybe through different entities, maybe Restore Act, or maybe you receive stuff from the commission or council. So just try to give a high-level picture here of work we do with you, important partners to us at NOAA Fisheries, and this is just kind of where we stand in some of that funding. You can see some of the caveats here. FY19, you see some of those big bumps in the ridge that includes hurricane disaster relief assistance, but this slide does not include CARES Act or COVID support. But just kind of high-level picture. Appreciate all of the partnership we have with you in executing those funds. Slide 13. I really quickly just mentioned this, but won't deep dive a whole lot here because some of you may have been interviewed from this NAPA group, the National Academy of Public Administrations, and I believe at least the commission leadership was probably interviewed or talked to about this. This was Congress had provided us funding and directed us to complete a report to review our budget process within NOAA Fisheries, including how we set priorities, how we work with constituents in setting those priorities, how we communicate our priorities, and just make sure we have sound fiscal environment. I flag it here, the report's available if anyone wants to go see it. We're doing a number of internal reviews and efforts to make sure we are following the guidelines in here. I really only flag this here as a number of you here, and maybe particularly Dave Donaldson and his team might have been on the interview list for the NAPA report here. Just point to that if you're interested. Slide 14. Just about wrapping up here, kind of closing out. How are we doing with COVID? I think everyone knows in FY20 we were pretty decimated in our field activities. We stopped our surveys almost completely. I think we had just over 400 days at sea in FY20, but in 21 we were back to normal, so to speak, within 1 year time, where we were doing over 2,200 days at sea. So it's still an issue. It's still something we're paying attention to, as is most of the nation. But right now, it is not the thing that is preventing us, at least any scale scope that it was in 20, from doing our field work or doing our surveys. We do have mechanical weather issues that still seem to always be around for doing anything at sea. But we are we're remaining fully operational in the COVID realm. Still under emergency activation orders, as leads to some of our limited travel, and most of the workforce is still teleworking. Sorry, slide 15. Sorry, a little out of place there. I think everyone's already mentioned the CARES Act and such, so maybe I'll just skip over this slide. I think you know where that's going. Appreciate the comments for us getting that money out the door quickly, and appreciate the Gulf states helping us administer that. So yeah, slide 16. We are again under emergency evacuation orders, but it really hasn't stopped us from doing what we need to do for most things in our job. I think we're nearing a place where we're going to be reintegrating and returning to work. I predict, in the next month or two, we will probably have kind of orders to start moving back to the office. And slide 17, just Closing out here with future outlook, as I mentioned up front, we're looking at FY22, 23 and 24 budgets. Big focus on this from this administration on climate readiness and climate ready fisheries, responding to the offshore wind development, environmental equity for underserved communities, and making sure we're operating in a safe work environment when we return. And I will stop there with slide 18 and see if there's any questions. A little bit of a quick drive through, but hopefully that's within the time frame you're looking for.
Any questions for Brian? That's a lot to digest.
It is. And I've got some links in there in the bottom and what have on the slides. Feel free to reach out anytime, direct email to me or what have you, questions, and we'll be glad to answer if there's not something else right now.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I've had several requests to go ahead and take that break at this point in time because some people do need to check out. I checked with Alan and he said he's okay with taking the break at this point, and then he'll come back in after that. So let's take a break until 10:45 if that works. I'll give everybody 15 minutes. That'll work? Okay, see you at 10:45. Thanks for your patience.
Better turn that on. You can hear me. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the chance to talk about the budget a little bit. I try not to duplicate too much what Brian said. The budget process is confusing at best and boring at its worst when you start talking about it. But it is what makes the world go around. And so I'll go through kind of the budget process and then what it looks like for the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is not too dissimilar from the NOAA tables that we get. Again, my name is Alan Brown. I'm the Assistant Regional Director for the Fish and Aquatic Conservation Program out of the Southeast, based in Atlanta. So the federal budget process, as I said, it's confusing, but it's something that we suffer through. I know that certainly the federal government runs on the process, and I know a lot of state agencies get some direct appropriations as well as they go through the federal budget process. So real quickly, the first budget request comes from the president. It's usually very pie in the sky. Everybody hears on the news the president submitted his budget. It's dead on arrival. It's usually really high, but it kind of gives an idea of what the president may be thinking. And that usually happens in February. And honestly, President Biden should have submitted his budget proposal in February, but he's a little bit overdue. The next part is kind of the budget resolution, and they take a look at the overall spending, they look at revenue generating activities, and then kind of the resulting surplus or deficits, and that kind of gives them an idea of some spending limits that they may have. And that resolution is usually due April 15th. And again, it's not a law. There's no penalty for being late, and they never meet that deadline anyway. I'm not sure why they put dates in there. Then they start with the Appropriations Bill, and there's 12 subcommittees that develop budget proposals for all the various departments. They hold hearings, and each of these subcommittees comes up with their own bill, and then that's where all the fun starts, as they have to go through conferences and committees, and they each have to pass both chambers of the House. When this doesn't happen, and I know Brian touched on it, we either get one of two things. We get government shutdowns, which does happen, and sometimes they're lengthy. We've had them up to 38 days as government shutdowns, or we go under a continuing resolution, which we have been up until just this past Saturday, from last October the 1st, and there are years that we stay on a continuing resolution the whole year, and which is not a good budget scenario. It limits us to previous year's fiscal spending minus roughly 2%. So it doesn't allow us to expand programs or to develop new initiatives. But it does keep us paid, and that's always important. The authorization bills, these are just the agency, the departments set the rules for operations, and they set certain funding levels for each department. And then the revenue measures, these are other ways that Congress looks at how they're going to raise money to pay for all the money that they're going to give away. And this has to do with tax laws, and there's permanent tax laws, and temporary tax laws, and it's just a way of looking at revenue. And then the budget reconciliation, and that's where all the committees, all the subcommittees, all the conferences try and get together to advance the spending through the various houses. It sets some deadlines on debates, but it does allow simple majority votes to set the funding levels. So like in the Senate, if it's 51 members, that actually will pass a spending bill. Part of that is also the debt ceiling. We all hear about that on the news. There's a debt ceiling and you can't go past this debt ceiling. What happens if they don't raise the debt ceiling? Does a government default? We've never defaulted yet, so they have legislation to raise the debt limit. They can also suspend the debt ceiling limit. There's all sorts of little tricks and trades that the Senate and the House use to get around some of these various debt ceiling limits. But after all these, I call them shenanigans, but after all these processes, what we get in the Fish and Wildlife Service, which is, again, not too similar to what NOAA gets, we get, and that is way too small, and I'm sorry for that. But this is what we call a comp table. If I was better with PowerPoint, I probably could have picked things out, but I'm not. So my apologies for that. But what happens is, there it is the president submits his budget. This is the previous enacted budget. And then the House and the Senate also set their budget limits. And you can, I won't say you can, see the various funding levels. So I can't even see them. But each one of the sub-activities that funds the Fish and Wildlife Service has line items in there. So it has some very specific earmarks. Earmarks are back in the budget this year. They were taken out for a while, but the senators and congressional folks still managed to direct money to certain activities, and we have sub-activities that fund the fish and wildlife activities. And there are line items in there specifically for the Southeast region. You heard Ash Bullard talk about it. The $5 million for the Warm Springs Fish Health Center, $2.5 million going to the Auburn Fish Disease Co-op. That was something that Senator Shelby and his aides had discussions with me and Ash. And Shelby, on his way out, I think has been generous, at least especially to the Fish and Wildlife Service. He has several line items in there for us. So we certainly appreciate that, and we'll miss him on the Appropriations Committee. But that's what we call our comp table. And as I said, right up until Saturday, we were under a CR, and they actually passed an omnibus bill. An omnibus bill is it's kind of Congress says, here's a bunch of money to the departments. You guys figure out how to spend it. Now there is language in there on how Congress wants it spent, so it's not kind of a free-for-all. But again, you can see, or not, again, apologies for that, the kind of spending that Congress put in for the Fish and Aquatic Conservation Program. These are all the programs within the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the FAC program has a line item in there. I think last year was $205 million funding the program. The House and the Senate were up towards $250 million, and I think the final number I saw was $220 million. So still an increase, but certainly, and as Brian was saying, certainly not what we were hoping for, but any increase is better than no increase. So we're very appreciative of the increases we got. And like I said, there's very specific line items in those increases that the Congress wants us to follow. So that's kind of the overall process. I'm going to talk a little bit about how that looks for Region 4, the Southeast region, on how we spend our money. This is how the Fish and Aquatic Conservation Program allocations have gone nationally. Whoops, back there. So they fairly steady. We had some increases for various things in the last couple of years, and like I said, it's pretty steady. Some growth, which is always good to see. And for us, this is how, for our fiscal year 21 operational budget, this is how we spent our money. So we have a big chunk of the money is hatchery operations. We have some reimbursable dollars from the Corps and from the Tennessee Valley Authority. We have maintenance, habitat conservation, population assessments, and aquatic invasive species work. And again, this represents kind of the percentage allocation that we get in each of those sub-activities. Again, you can see them listed across the bottom: hatchery operations, maintenance, equipment, habitat, population assessments, and invasive species. And again, this is a percentage of the national allocation that we get in the Southeast region. What I want to kind of highlight is these kind of sub-activities right there, and the very small percentage that we get on that national basis. And these are the sub-activities that actually fund our Fish and Wildlife Conservation offices, like Glenn at the Baton Rouge office. You know, the Southeast region has a tremendous amount of diversity. You know, we get roughly 2.1% overall of the habitat population budget for the Fish and Wildlife Service. That supports less than 13 FTEs, full-time employees, across the whole Southeast. And the Southeast is 10 states and Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And that is in 4 offices. We used to have 6 offices. A lot of you know, Doug Fruget had an office at Ocean Springs. We actually had to close that office because we could not fund that office anymore. But in the Southeast, we have 62% of the freshwater fishes, 75% of the nation's mussels, 70 major river basins, 18% of the barriers, 50% of the nation's wetlands, and we have 13 people that work on habitat and population assessments. And you know, Dave and his folks have been so helpful in trying to take that message to folks who can make a difference in some of those funding activities. It's an incredible job that those 13 people do with the amount of money, well, the amount of resources that they're responsible for. And then again, Dave, thank you so much for helping folks to understand maybe one day the importance of what these offices do for conservation. I mean, they're the critical point, and I think making folks understand how critical they are is important to look at, you know, increased funding in the future. I will say a lot of these funding decisions and these allocation methodologies were developed 20 or 30 years ago, and we still suffer the consequences. I don't know why decisions were made back 30 years ago. They didn't ask me. I wouldn't have made those decisions, but they were made, and like I said, we're still trying to play catch up from decisions they made decades ago. Let's see. So one of the things I want to do real quick, and I know that the focus of the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Fisheries program is mostly freshwater. There are certainly overlaps with some of the things that the Commission and the Marine Resource Agencies do, sturgeon work, you know, oyster reef restoration and things like that. But the majority, in reality, is freshwater. And I thought, if you don't mind, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown on some of the programs that we fund. Again, mostly freshwater things, but these are the things that we spend our appropriations on. One of our big programs is the Mitigation Hatchery program, and we have 6 facilities that are funded by either the Corps or the Tennessee Valley Authority, and these were built to mitigate federal water projects as they altered natural streams from kind of a warm and cool water. When they built these big hydro dams, the cold water releases displaced all those native fishes, and the solution was to build these facilities, fund these facilities for salmonid production, mostly rainbow trout, brook trout, some cutthroat trout actually too, but that's funded by those various other agencies. And whoops, wrong one. And this is just some of the production that comes out of those facilities, and it's a put and take, but it's a tremendous economic driver for a lot of these very small rural communities where these dams are, and they create a lot of economic impact. So they're very public recreation oriented, and get a lot of good public use out of these facilities and the stockings that they do. But they also have other capacities as we've looked at conservation needs, especially over the last decade. What are other things that our facilities have the capacity to do? And certainly endangered mussels, again, with a majority of being in the southeast, some of these facilities have taken on culture of endangered mussels. In the southeast, there's a tremendous amount of small stream fishes that are either threatened and endangered or at risk. And so we're developing capacities at these facilities to help address those recovery needs as well. Then we have our warm and cool water fish hatcheries, and we had back in the 20s and 30s they built a tremendous amount of these, and it was built back for what they called the farm pond program, and it was basically bass, bluegill, channel catfish. If you had a pond on your farm, you could make an application to a federal fish hatchery, and they would come and you would meet at the post office on April 15th and bring your bucket, and they would give you 50 bass or 100 catfish or whatever it may be for your pond. Obviously, we don't do that anymore, and most of our warm water facilities now are engaged in restoration recovery efforts for mostly big river fishes, alligator gar, striped bass, American shad, paddlefish. We do support states with some of their recreational needs, and that's just a capacity thing. If we have additional pond space that's not being used and a state needs more largemouth bass or catfish, we do help support those states with those as well. But even these facilities, and normally these facilities are anywhere from 50 to 500 acres, so there's a lot of land associated with these, and so there's a lot of other capacity needs, again, that we're developing at these facilities to help meet recovery goals for a lot of T&E species, gopher frogs and gopher tortoises. And I realize that these may not be aquatic, but I always figure somewhere in their life cycle they have to touch water somewhere. So to me, that's going to be aquatic. Whether you're drinking it, walking through it, sliding it doesn't matter. So we can push that envelope a little bit for aquatics, and we've branched out into things with indigo snakes, which is a very rare snake. And we actually built a snake house at one of our facilities just to meet the capacity, just to meet the propagation needs for this particular species. And I still occasionally get to go out and touch critters, not very often, not as much as I like, but I do get to touch them. And kind of our newest venture is the Florida Grasshopper Sparrow. And this is probably one of the most endangered birds in the world. I think there's 80 in the wild. They're found in two counties in Florida. And again, they came to us and said, hey, can you help us with this? And I said, sure, what do you need? And they said, well, we need some bird cages and places to fledge some birds. And I said, sure. And so we had prison labor come and put up some aviaries, and we've been very successful in raising the Florida Grasshopper Sparrow for recovery efforts. So lots of neat things going on in the fisheries program that maybe are a little outside the traditional realm. We talked a little bit yesterday about our fish health program in conjunction with Ashbullard and Auburn. Certainly, we don't want to be a vector of pathogens to the wild, so we're very careful on how we on what we release and where we release it. And we have a good fish health center. It's in Warm Springs, Georgia, and certainly with Senator Shelby's generosity, we're going to be able to really ramp that up, put in some new infrastructure, buy new equipment, and keep that fish health disease program going. I touched a little bit on the Fish and Wildlife Conservation offices and everything they do. And again, it's 13 people across the whole the southeastern United States, and they do everything from population monitoring and assessments to habitat work, invasive species work, way more work than they can handle. And as part of that, we actually do a lot of fish passage. I think Brian mentioned the fish passage money that they got. We actually got $200 million, $40 million a year to do fish passage work in the Southeast. We are lucky in the Southeast that we actually have a unique skill set. We have equipment operators and with skills and abilities to remove dams ourselves. We do in-house labor. Most of the time when you're looking at fish passage, you're contracting out and things like that. And we have the ability to actually develop the proposal from the ground up, budget estimates, what it's going to look like. And you can see this was a structure in North Carolina. These are usually old structures. They're old mill dams and things like that. But these are big structures. This particular dam was about 40 feet high and 340 feet long. So they're not small structures. And when you see our folks in there beating on those things with excavators, you're a little bit in awe. But one of the things that we want to do when we're doing these things, and where the Fish and Wildlife Conservation offices come in, is that pre and post assessment. Are we what results are we expecting, and then do we get those results down the road? And that includes, do we want to take this dam out? Is it stopping now? Invasive carp. So are there pathogens in there? Are there non-native species that are going to go up into some of these smaller streams and eat the freckle-bellied mad tom and things like that? So there's a lot of work that goes into this, and that's just one of the one of the many things that our Fish and Wildlife Conservation offices are involved in. We heard a lot about invasive species. If it's invasive, it's in the southeast. Just the weather and everything else is conducive to it. Snakeheads, zebra mussels, pythons, tegus, you name it. It's in the southeast, and that's a big focus for the Fish and Wildlife Service as well. And something that our Fish and Wildlife Conservation offices are involved in monitoring those kinds of things. Obviously, invasive carp, and this is, I don't know, Joe, how do you run this video? Whoops, can you do that? So one of the things, especially in Western Kentucky, was the invasive carp were really getting bad, and some constituents reached out to Senator McConnell and said, we're having they're impacting the tournaments and economics, and so we brought them up there and did this little demonstration. This was in right below Barkley Dam, and so we were all staying on top of the dam, and yes, and as soon as this has been on YouTube and everything else, and it's just that's in one small little corner of one lake in Kentucky. And so that's what we fight, and it was really great to have the senator there, because like Senator Shelby, he had some constituent concerns, and he actually added $14 million to the invasive carp budget. It was $11 million in fiscal year 19, and in fiscal year 20, it jumped up to $25 million. Now that supports invasive carp efforts all along the whole Mississippi River Basin, but that's a pretty impressive video when you try and show. I know Cindy had a couple videos yesterday. I don't know if anybody has a chance to see those. The little redneck carp guys out there, they're shooting with bows and arrows, and they got helmets on, and they're putting them in nets and scoring baskets with them and all that kind of stuff. But this is certainly a tremendous issue. And I think how this kind of relates to some of the Gulf states is we've talked about some of those freshwater pulses that are coming out of some of these rivers. It's allowing some of these carp to move into the estuaries where the fresh water is kind of hitting those pulses. And what we're afraid of, and there's been some limited documentation, they're actually using those estuaries to move into different river basins as opposed to just moving upstream. So that certainly is a big concern, because nobody wants these things in their rivers. One of the things we also try and do is develop, like everybody does, where to put the money, where to use your resources, where's your wisest allocation of your resources. So a number of years ago, we developed this watershed priority. We looked at different metrics in the fisheries program that we thought were important to us, and kind of developed this map. And whether it's our map or it's TNC's or it's American Rivers, the hotspots are always very similar. So our analysis kind of showed the same thing. That's the area of most importance, and in reality, that's where we have absolutely no Fish and Wildlife Conservation offices. We have 4 offices. They're along the coast. We have Glens in Baton Rouge. We have one in Panama City. We have one in Vero Beach, Florida, and we have one in South Carolina. We have nothing in that kind of central southeastern United States. But there are opportunities along the coasts where we've developed some priority opportunities to put some on the ground work. And I think one of the things that we're looking at is the tremendous amount of I'll say opportunities, but this is a picture of all the dams that we've identified in the southeastern United States. There's 189,000 of them, and they range anywhere from the big hydro dams to small mill dams, small earthen dams, but you get to the point where do you even start? And I think that's a question we've wrestled with for a number of years and still wrestling with. But I think as we're looking at areas to work, especially along the coast, it's how do we everything kind of flows to the Gulf, not everything, but a lot. So things we do upstream can have effects on what happens in the Gulf and to the Gulf states. So we want to certainly continue our cooperative efforts with the Commission. And with the Gulf states as we develop our priorities going forward into the future, where can we have coordinated efforts that benefit both, understanding that marine resources is your focus, and we're more freshwater, but there certainly is an interface in there which gives us opportunities to develop those joint projects. And the other thing that we have in the southeast is road crossings, and all the little black, almost all black, 772,000 road crossings that have not been assessed for any kind of migration barriers or conservation issues. And the greens are the 17,800 road crossings that have been assessed either by us or Forest Service. There's a lot of NGOs out there that are assessing those as well. And again, there's a lot of those along the coast. I think that we can develop coordinated efforts with, understanding that each of our particular roles in conservation. So I like to say there's lots of opportunities out there. That's an understatement, but I think that's all I have, and certainly willing to answer any questions. And thank you for indulging me a little bit and kind of let me show you what the Fish and Aquatic Conservation Program, at least a little bit into some of the things that we're doing. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Alan. Questions from the committee? Chris?
It's just a minor point, Alan, but those dams that you showed the dots associated with, that you said they range anywhere from a mill pond dam up to a hydroelectric. But I mean, is that even like an earthen dam to create a cattle tank on a basically a drainage area? Is that also in there or no? Where do you draw the line at what you can
There is a line. I think some of those, because there's many more of those. So those aren't necessarily part of this evaluation. It's mostly low-head earthen dams that were developed 100 years ago for running mills and things like that. But one of the things that we do is we do assess those kinds of, whether they're cattle crossings and things like that. If they're impacting streams, we work with farmers and maybe they've dammed up a small trib to provide water for their cattle. We'll go and actually try and drill wells on their property and give them an alternate water source, and then put in cattle exclusion devices to try and develop that riparian zone and get that water moving back into the major tribs.
Any other questions, Dave?
Just a comment. You said that the Gulf, a lot of the water flows to the Gulf. Based on that picture, I'm not sure how any of it gets to the Gulf. That's a pretty daunting graphic there.
It is. It's amazing. And when you're looking at these dams, it's not just a question of going in and taking, and a lot of dams are on private property. And so we're working with landowners, and it's just not a question of that dam's been there 100 years and what has it done? Well, now it's a municipal water supply. And you take that dam out, you're going to start putting people's docks and boat ramps out of water. So there's a lot of things that go into assessing a dam removal. And not just the biological aspects of it. But we work with private landowners or cities, and we've put in water control structures for municipal water supplies so they don't dry up when we remove a dam, or we do partial removals. And one of the things we also look at is how can we remove a structure and give the city or the town or the community something back. We did one on the Dan River in North Carolina, and they actually wanted kayak riffles. And so we said, yeah, we can do that. There's some endangered fishes in there, but we can make resting areas, and we actually put kayak areas in there, and the whole big kayak industry has grown up around that. I mean, people built kayak rental places, and now you have 10 miles of kayak. So there's a lot that goes into it, and not just necessarily the biology of the species inhabiting that water.
Okay, anything else? Alan? Thank you. Glenn, do you have anything?
No, thanks. I think he covered it pretty well.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is Gulf States Commission program reports. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to refer you to tabs B and C in the briefing materials that was sent out ahead of time. Darren kind of covered a little bit of this in the TCC report, but I'm going to go into a couple of other things. As he mentioned, we are doing the red drum profile. We're getting close to finishing that, and we're going to start the mangrove snapper profile this summer. Those are the main activities that we do in IJ. There's other things which currently, I mean, I've reported on it several times in the past. We've been doing some genetics work on triple tail worldwide for a number of years now with fin clips and a lot of samples coming from all over the world. Those are finally processed. Dr. Sayon at Gulf Coast Research Lab has the data, has the results. He's not shared that yet with me. I was hoping to have something to at least give a little preliminary report on, since I've mentioned it so many times here. But by October, I'd like to invite him to actually come and hopefully talk to the TCC a little bit about our results. Something to actually put a fork in on our genetics project. We are doing a little bit more acoustic work, again targeting triple tail. Something that came out of our triple tail profile from a few years ago was there was a need. Nobody had really been targeting them in the Gulf for doing migration work. There was a little bit on the South Atlantic, so we queued off of that. And the last couple of years prior to COVID, and now this year, prior to COVID, we put out 50 tags. They had about a 1.5 year life expectancy, and they ran out. We didn't get a lot of data back on those due to the short life of the tags. This time we've got about 75 tags we're putting out. We put 27 out in Florida Bay last month, hoping that those smaller fish will make it up somewhere into the northern Gulf. That's sort of what we're anticipating. And then in the northern Gulf, we're going to put out about 50 V16 tags this summer, targeting Mississippi Sound, maybe Alabama waters, may even end up a little bit in Louisiana. Through this process, we've expanded the array here in Mississippi Sound. We now have gated most of the sound between all the islands. There's a north-south corridor down the Pascagoula Ship Channel. I'd like to thank the DMR and GCRL for the collaboration that we've had working on this project. We've provided the receivers and the logistics, and they're providing the maintenance and downloads of those receivers. It's contributing to all the acoustic work that's going on in this region. I'm hopeful that we'll pick up tagged flounder from Alabama, part of the surf projects that are going on over there, flounder over here, cobia, red drum, Gulf sturgeon are definitely hitting a lot of our receivers. We've gotten a lot of uploads of data from those. In addition, having the commission work with the lab and the DMR, I was able to provide maybe a little more, not leverage, but just a new player in this game with the Coast Guard. And we've had a great success working with the U.S. Coast Guard in the Mobile office and in Gulfport to actually be able to utilize existing navigation structures as mounts, permanent hard mounts for our receivers. We've got them on floating cans in all the passes. I think we've used about 20 Coast Guard existing ATONs for the commission receivers. GCRL has benefited another maybe a dozen on pilings and moorings. So we're able to facilitate opening up a little more cooperation, which is easier than putting out some sort of anchored, buoyed receiver that just gets hammered during shrimp season. We lost a lot of gear the last couple of years due to these less permanent structures. So that's been going very well. A little bit of a plug for our Flounder Symposium. The week after next, we're going to be in Baton Rouge for 2 days. We're hosting a academic and management symposium sort of on the state of flounders in the Gulf and the South Atlantic. I had 84 people attending. As of a few minutes ago, we now have 85. This includes every state from Texas to Virginia, universities, state agencies, and we're hoping that that symposium is a big success in kind of figuring out where we are. There's been declines in a lot of places in flounder in general, and so we're going to try to kind of key in on maybe some of the sources of that reduction and look long term, maybe what we can do collaboratively across the regions to begin to look at this as a project. We do have the SURF program going on. It's the second year of the supplemental money that we have been able to provide the states for IJ-related research projects. I presented that to the TCC. We've got continuations of the 2021 projects for the most part. As Darren mentioned, the base, it looks like it should be close to about 190,000 for each state. There's a little bit more money, and then we can go ahead and carry over any unspent money from this year into next year. So those projects are fairly well funded, and we're hoping that that continues. It seems to be working well. They're covering a lot of the research needs that we've identified in our FMPs and profiles for our inshore and nearshore species. And I think I'm going to stop with IJ at this point. If there's any questions, I'm happy to entertain.
Scott, the Flounder Symposium, which I'm super excited about, is there going to be an online option for that?
We're going to be broadcasting it on our YouTube channel. It means that you won't have audience participation remotely, but a lot of people have their staff going. So if you have a question or you'd like them to address something, you can always email one of the people at the meeting, and I'm sure that they can ask a question. You can send it to me. I'm coordinating this with Dr. Steve Midway and Michael Dance from LSU. The three of us are putting this together. There's 3 main sessions, and then there's going to be a final wrap-up synthesis, sort of where do we go from here. It's Tuesday and Wednesday, the 29th and 30th in Baton Rouge at the MC Suites. Shameful plug. You can still register, but we don't have room for more talks. We have 27 talks at this point for 2 days.
Any other questions or comments? Steve?
Okay. Tab C, you'll see the aquaculture update I provided prior to the meeting. We're putting up a table of the small grants that we are doing this year on our pilots. These are for projects not necessarily related to oysters, but any aquaculture, potential species, technology, advancement, outreach. And you can see the 9 projects that we are funding this year. They span much of the Gulf. It looks like there's quite a few in Florida, but they really apply and have expand out further than that. The one project that we've spent a lot of time dealing with, scroll down if you can, Joe, is I'm calling it the whale alarm. We've got an automated marine mammal system that's being piloted in the Gulf, specifically in support of the Man of Fish project, which is a previously funded pilot that we've been working on. This is to try to identify interactions of marine mammals within the aquaculture areas, specifically off of Pensacola, where the Man of Fish Farm site will be. That's a rice whale habitat, and there's a lot of concern about rice whales. So they're putting out gear to see if they can monitor and actually detect marine mammals, and in addition, train the AI in the system to recognize whale songs of species outside of where it's been used before off Connecticut and the North Atlantic. So it's an interesting project. It's a very simple project, but apparently the permitting and the requirements with the Office of Protected Resources at NOAA makes it a very difficult project. Once we get through that, we then have the DOD, because they do not like observations of their live ammunition artillery range. So we're doing the dance right now between all the agencies, and hopefully that will actually get gear in maybe towards the end of the year, and see if that works. The last thing is the integrated multi-trophic aquaculture project. We put out an RFP for IMTA. There was a single submission, and that has been awarded. Dr. John Valentine at Dolphin Island Sea Lab to put out essentially I think it's called the Aqua Tank. It's a large floating cage net that finfish goes in, along with two other potential production species as part of that multi-trophic. So it had to be finfish, mollusks, and some sort of macroalgae. And that is more of a demonstration project. It's being done in the Northeast, but this is going to end up being somewhere off of Dolphin Island within state waters. They're still working out all the details on that, but that's a $1.8 million project that's going to be happening in Alabama, hopefully starting soon. We're waiting for OMB to approve our request to enter into that agreement, and then we'll be moving forward. And that's all I have for that. If there's any questions on aquaculture.
Any questions from the commission? Okay. Yes, sir.
Chris? Steve, with your Gulf of Mexico marine aquaculture pilot projects, the first one listed is practical training of women towards sustained mariculture workforce in Puerto Rico.
Yes, sir.
Can you provide a contact for that so I can follow up with them just for more information?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Any others? Okay. Thank you, Steve. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Fall Shrimp Groundfish Survey took place last year from October 4th through November 31st. Cmap sampled 274 stations during this survey. We'd originally hoped to sample approximately 300, but we ran into some weather impacts. The Environmental Data Work Group met on February 22nd to review the environmental section of the Trawling Operations Manual, and all Cmap sampling bases their environmental sampling off of the procedures and protocols developed for the Trawling Operations Manual. Since our last meeting, the Commission worked with the Fish and Wildlife Foundation of Florida, Inc. to acquire a couple of acoustic cameras and hardware for sampling reef fish. We were able to sample two Kongsberg FlexView sonar cameras, underwater housings, and also peripherals for FWRI to use during reef fish sampling. And FWRI is going to be using these cameras along with their video gear to develop techniques and protocols for reef fish sampling in the western Gulf of Mexico, where you can't use the video gear. This equipment is going to be inventoried and managed at FWRI's Fishery Independent Monitoring Program. Cmap continues to discuss the future of the vertical line survey. The CDAR data workshop for red snapper will be held in early May in Mississippi. If data from the vertical line survey are not used in the next red snapper stock assessment, the survey will probably be discontinued. The subcommittee has discussed several options for how Cmap partners can contribute to existing or new surveys. Possibilities include more partners participate in the reef fish survey through video sampling, acoustic sampling, or habitat mapping. As we heard just a few minutes ago, it looks like Cmap is going to be level funded for FY 2022 at $5.125 million. This funding will be split amongst the Gulf, South Atlantic, and Caribbean Cmap components. The Commission's executive director went to DC in February and discussed the Cmap budget with congressional staffers, and I think he guaranteed that if we didn't receive at least a $1 million increase the next year, that he was personally going to cover that with his own money to make sure that Cmap gets extra funding.
You misunderstood. I said monopoly.
Well, you know, we did mention level funding, and this year is a very good illustration that level funding is really not level funding. It's basically a decrease in sampling. With fuel prices going up like they have, that's going to impact some of our survey work this year. And 5.125 million sounds great, but you split that amongst actually 3 components and also National Fishery Service. And since we've had that level funding for almost 10 years now, it really is not as much as it used to be. It's better than a decrease, but an increase would really help us out. In 2022, Cmap plans to conduct the spring plankton survey, bottom longline survey, the vertical line survey, the summer and fall shrimp groundfish surveys, the reef fish survey, and also a fall plankton survey. The Commission continues to manage Cmap data and distribute the data to interested parties. Since October, the Commission has fulfilled 3 Cmap data requests, and the databases, the various databases have been downloaded 90 times. That completes my report.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions? Reef?
So with the CDAR meeting coming up, if the vertical line data are being used in the current assessment, are the council and NOAA aware that of the upcoming funding limitations, with particularly the Mississippi vertical line sampling being funded by NIFWF and not through Cmap? Then if that's going to continue, there will have to be additional funding to support that research.
Right. If we would like to see that survey continue Gulf-wide, it's going to take a pretty significant amount of funds to continue that. Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida all use NIFWF funds to either do vertical line sampling or increase their vertical line sampling off their coast. That money is gone. They're no longer doing that. So yes, if they wanted to continue to have a Gulf-wide survey, we would need that, since we only have Alabama, Louisiana, and Texas participating currently.
Any other questions? Okay, Jeff?
All right. Joe? Okay, just wanted to talk to y'all about the CARES Act and what's been going on with it. I believe at the October meeting, I told everyone that we are done with the original CARES Act. We paid out over $20 million to almost 1,600 applicants during this program. We received a few weeks ago Texas's last invoice. So once we pay that invoice, we're essentially pretty much done with that, except for the audits. CARES Act 2, it was signed into law at the end of December 2020. Around $26 million was again made available to affected applicants. Alabama, since the October meeting, they approved 65 applications for 63 applicants during their application period. And the Commission paid these applicants almost $3 million back in November. Mississippi held their application period from October 20th through November 19th of last year. If applicants were not fully compensated for their losses from the original CARES Act, their application was automatically enrolled in the CARES Act 2 program. DMR approved 419 applications for 277 applicants, and the commission sent out a little over $2.9 million to these applicants on January 25th of this year. Louisiana sent us their first applicant list in early November. They sent us their second one in early December, and an additional 22-person applicant list and a final payment list were sent to the commission on February 14th. We have paid out $12.1 million in payments to approximately 697 applicants through that program. Texas did not open a new application period for their CARES Act 2 program since their first application period was for losses that occurred between January 1st and December 31st of 2020. So using CARES Act 2 funds, Parks and Wildlife proposed to pay in full all remaining claims that were not paid during the original CARES Act. So we received an applicant list on November 1st that we then paid. And it total for that was about $946,000. In January, Parks and Wildlife decided to give applicants a second chance to qualify for CARES Act 2 funds. During the initial application period, some applicants did not provide all needed documentation or missed the deadlines for submitting this documentation. So they decided to open that back up. Some of these people would have been qualified, but either they didn't receive it in the mail or they didn't check their email or it went into spam or whatever, but they've been given a second chance. Texas had about $6.5 million remaining after paying off those initial applicants. Not sure exactly yet. They're working through that second chance applicant list right now. They're hopefully going to have us something here in the next few weeks. But the remaining funds are going to be dedicated to a marketing effort that's led by the Texas Department of Agriculture. And it's going to be in support of the Texas seafood industry. The goal of this project will be to unite popular seafood sectors by collectively expanding their marketing, tourism, and consumer education platforms. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jeff. Questions? Scott?
Yeah, I'm just going to reiterate, I think I said it at the virtual meeting that Jeff and Angie were the superstars of the CARES Act payment plans for the state of Alabama, for sure. We put together a program, but with their assistance, it went, I don't know if it could have gone any smoother. I mean, I really don't. They provided a lot of input and then did all the legwork to get folks paid. And in Alabama, it would have been torturous to try and get applicants paid under the state system. So without this, we only had the 60 plus whatever applicants. We would have probably cut that to almost nobody because they wouldn't have been able to get into the state system. I mean, Chris probably knows how that goes. It would have been terrible. So I thank the commission staff as a whole, but especially the two of you guys for how much work you put into it. And from my perspective, I know you guys were beating your head against the wall and cussing me and those kind of things, but you sure made our life a lot easier. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Chris, comment?
Yeah, I just want to publicly associate myself with those comments. And, I would just say ditto, but really appreciate the job you guys did and the help you provided.
Anything else from the commission? Jeff, thank you. Next on the agenda is sport fish restoration. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This information is in tab F of the briefing book. I'm going to run through it real quick just to show you some of the stuff we've done in sport fish. As I mentioned last time, we're piloting some continuous water quality monitoring, looking at 6 parameters off the coast of Mississippi right now in the pilot study: temperature, conductivity, salinity, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, and pH, using the EX03 by YSI. We're partnering that up with EdgeTech's ropeless fishing systems to deploy them on the bottom. That's the unit there. And we're also working with Steve to get his acoustic fish tag receivers incorporated in those. So I have one of his receivers in each one of my units. This just shows some of the steps I took to try to stop any biofouling on these units, because they are deployed for 3 months in the water, which I'll show you in a subsequent picture how that worked. This is the unit ready to go out. The data sawn, the data sawn is in this vertical tube here with all of its protective coatings on it and everything else, and then that PVC is painted with antifouling paint as well. There are acoustic release cages, and you can again see Steve's fish tag receivers right there. I was working also with GCRL on this. They're the ones that are getting me out there to help me deploy these and recover them, and downloading the tag data for Steve. We deployed these at Mississippi's Fish Havens at Cat Island 9/11 and over here at 10 to get it all the way across the sound. Steve or Joe, can you hit play on it? This is when we actually deployed the units on the first day. Hover on the picture. There you go. And what we did to test out how well these things would right themselves in 15 feet is we pushed them in every orientation we could think of off the side of the boat to make sure they're going to land upright. So what we do is run the boat up onto the coordinates. When they say we're within 20 feet or less, we just shove it off the side. Every time in 15 feet of water, it righted itself. The unit can tell you its position on the bottom with the deck unit and the app that goes with it. That right there is the tube that the data sawn's in, and the actual part, the sawned probes are up here above the cage to keep it out of the mud. And then when you send with the deck unit the release, it just it unwinds that puck and sends the lid to the cage to the surface, which then you can pull up the whole unit, reload it, change out the data sawn. There we go. So after 3 months, we went out there, we deployed these in October, and then went back in December to change out the data sawns. This was 3 months in the water. As you can see, the cage grows stuff very well, but we did everything we wanted to protect, stayed perfectly clear. All the sawn housing was clear, and all of our probes stayed perfectly clear for the entire 3 months. We're able to release all of the inhabitants safely out of there, and then get these things switched out. It samples every 30 minutes, so we're actually able to retrieve these, change the data sawns, clean the cages, and get them back in the water within 30 minutes, so we're not missing any data. And in 30 minutes, this is what they look like with just cleaning everything off, putting a new data sawn in there, and then redeploying them on the same site. Joe Fair on our staff developed the site to put all this information out. It's on our GarMap website. And so if you go in there and click on any one of the blue icons there for the water quality, and then click on the chart, it'll display the data that those are the last 30 days that have been recovered from the units. The 6 parameters, their average reading over that 30 days, and then their deviation. And if you click on any one of the headers, you'll get a table. This is for 30 days, and what it's doing is it's averaging those 30-minute samples to make up a 1-day dot. He also added a feature where you can change it from 30 to 60 to 90 day, 30, 60, or 90-day period down here to see longer time frames, and you can actually add a second parameter to the same table to see how they're correlating with each other. So that's just temperature and your dissolved oxygen. And then after we got back with the second download, he added another feature because we saw some of these outliers like this, try to figure out what that is and why that's way off track with the other ones. So he put in, if you click on the individual dots, you'll get all of the actual data for that 1-day period. Those are the actual 30-minute increments. So you can see that it actually was reading different levels throughout the day. It wasn't just an outlier. It was just went down and came back up with obviously a slug of water went through there. So, like I said, that project we've had them out in October. We switched them in December, and then I just downloaded them again last week. And we have about 20,000 total records now from those 3 sites, and about 5,000 fish tag detections in those units that provide Steve's program. We finished the 4th year of the Jimmy Sanders Memorial Lionfish Challenge in December. Again, it was a virtual tournament because of the pandemic this year using Fishing Chaos. They collected 31 lionfish off of Mississippi throughout the entire year. It's pretty much the same 6 to 8 guys that participate every year now. And we disseminated all the prizes in December to the winners, both first place, second place, and then the most trips taken. We had several people that would go out and do a lot of dives. They just wouldn't see any lionfish. So we're not getting high numbers, which is good information off Mississippi. And it's that program is made possible by our sponsors that provide a lot of that equipment that we can give out as incentives. And with that, that's the end of the sportfish restoration.
Commission questions? Hearing none, James? Go ahead.
All right, we'll jump right into aquatic nuisance species. We heard a lot about this yesterday and then in the TC report, so I'm not going to go too detailed on that. But over the 7 years of our partnership with Fish and Wildlife Service, we have funded the 43 projects at almost $1.1 million now, covering a whole suite of species. And that has really led to a better partnership and communication between Fish and Wildlife Service, our commission, the Gulf and South Atlantic Regional Panel of the National Task Force, which I coordinate, and also the academic community. We're really pulling in a lot of those researchers back to our group to talk with the managers across our region. These are the 4 projects that were selected in 2021. In 2021, we changed it up. We doubled the amount of funding for each project to $50,000 and doubled the time frame to 2 years to allow for bigger projects. So we're not able to fund as many projects, but they're longer and more robust projects. And with this, I'm going to be working with Cindy Williams, who was here yesterday for Fish and Wildlife Service, to get the RFP out for the 2022 funding cycle. As soon as Fish and Wildlife Service has kind of a number on that, we'll get that released. We're continuing with our effort with the invasive species traveling trunk. This is an educational outreach trunk that states use a lot of, universities use it, and then some school teachers that use it in their science classes. That really dropped off during the pandemic, but over the last 3 months, it's really starting to pick back up as our state agencies are getting back out and doing public outreach events. So we have a couple of these out right now. I'm still chairing the Prevention Subcommittee for the National Task Force, and I'm a member of the task force. We're charged with trying to address 5 of their action items within their new strategic plan. And in the last task force meeting, they also gave us 2 other ones. One was to identify some steps needed to conduct traffic assessments, to inform strategic placement of roadside inspection stations. A lot of that was a recommendation coming out of the Western Regional Panel, but there has been more interest in doing more boat inspections, even coming over to the east now. So that's something I wanted us to look at. And then we also established a fish production and retail hitchhiker mitigation work group. This was spurred on by the shipment of the mothballs that had zebra mussels, and then just recently there was a shipment of goldfish that came from an aquaculture facility, and it had a crayfish in it that went to a PetSmart. So that kind of caught some attention, and then we established this, see if we can get some outreach information out to try to address that vector. And then just some of our meetings we have coming up, both my regional panel meeting. I'm hoping to hold that in person, but last year they put us kind of under the umbrella of the Federal Advisory Committee Act, where we have to get clearance now through DC to hold an in-person meeting. So hopefully that's loosening up now and we'll be able to hold that this summer. And then the task force is going to hold their next meeting in May virtually on the 24th through the 26th. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, James. Any questions? Okay, seeing none. Greg?
Thank you,
You're
Mr.
up.
Chairman. You now instantly realize we should have closed with James because he had all the cool, interesting pictures. Hard for data nerds to produce things like that. So, yeah. So, I just want to give you a few slides to give you a look back at last year, what that looked like for our fisheries dependent collection and monitoring program, what we were able to accomplish, and where we're going in 2022. So 2021, we continued many ongoing long-term data collection programs, recreational landing sampling, commercial trip ticket program, collecting ages and lengths through our biosampling program, and just the overall program and data management system administration. We met all of our goals that we started with at the beginning of that calendar year, and we considered 2021 a success. Some of the things that were additional accomplishments that I just want to point out to you. So we fully implemented electronic tablets for the MRIP dockside survey. So we no longer use paper. Field samplers in Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi collect those data with electronic tablets. It's uploaded to the data management system at Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission. We've seen increased productivity. The number of assignments that samplers can collect on busy days or in a 6-hour time slot has significantly increased due to the technology gains. And we're actually providing clean data to NOAA fisheries almost a week quicker than we could under a paper reporting method. So all the things you would expect from a transition to electronic technology is being realized. We've also implemented the dockside validation survey component of the CFIRE program. All 5 states have port agents in the field collecting trip data and landings information from the federally permitted for-hire fleet, and that data is also being collected on tablets, and that flows into our office and will be transmitted to the regional office as they figure out how they're going to incorporate that in their data analyses, coupling that validation survey data with the electronic logbook reports and the BMS data. And we are working with that. There's still a lot of improvements to be made, at least on the validation survey of selecting the proper sites where these boats are located and improving the efficiency of sampler time at the docks. But it's been a good start. We completed a research project looking at shrimp commercial conversion factors, and the final step in that is we're going to have a meeting shortly to determine how those are going to get utilized, because we did find some differences compared to the old historical conversion factors that were used to convert reported units to whole weight. So the states need to come together and decide how we're going to utilize those new results as those conversion factors are applied. We provide data for the red snapper stock assessment. We provide data to all of the federal stock assessments as those come up, and data deadlines are provided to us. Lastly, for this year, I will refer you to tab H in your briefing book. It looks at it's a preliminary look at our programmatic funding, and I say that because, as we've heard today, NOAA's just realizing what their budget is and what they're going to be able to move to us. But we're operating under the idea of level funding, that there's not any additional funding coming. We feel confident, based on that information, we're going to be able to fund all of our ongoing activities here. The 2 things I'll highlight is we do have some money to continue this look and research into commercial conversion factors. And so with the completion of the shrimp research project, the states are moving into researching reef fish. Because some of these factors that have been used are over 30 years old, and there's really no information on where those came from and how those numbers were obtained. So this is highly valuable research for all of our states to take a closer look at that in the current day and age. And lastly, everybody knows the elephant in the room. There's a ton of still remaining concern about the large differences between state survey estimates and federal recreational survey estimates. And there was a workshop held recently that's developing a transition plan to use state survey data, and how do we further explain some of the differences between these surveys. There's going to be a research plan that comes out of that, and some of that research is going to involve states and doing research within the states, using their surveys or using potential new research that will involve the states. And we envision when that becomes clear of what that would be, those would be subawards that would be executed through the Gulf Fin Cooperative Agreement. We would make those funds available to execute those research projects. We just don't know exactly what they are yet and what they might cost and how much total money we have available to execute those. But that will be something that'll hit us probably in 2022. And for all of those projects that would involve state assistance, we feel like our agreement is going to be the funding vehicle to make that happen. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Greg. Questions? Got one. Jack?
Yeah, I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank Greg for his cooperation with folks in my division and getting the dockside validation survey established. It's been a very good partnership, and I really appreciate all your help.
Anything else from the committee? All right. Thank you, Greg. Next is fisheries restoration. Charlie?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. So I've got the pleasure of managing the most newly formed fisheries restoration program, and one of the primary focuses is working with NOAA and Florida Sea Grant with the Return 'em Right program. So the emphasis there being how to release fish right and not just release them. So we're trying to build awareness really around the use of fish descending devices and other best practices. We're realizing that there's a pretty big knowledge gap on what options folks have to consider when releasing fish, and so we want to make sure that we're kind of closing the gap, particularly with respect to fish descending devices in the Gulf. So we've got several ongoing studies. There's 4 of them in the Gulf. Several of them were mentioned in Laura's report with Sea Grant, but there's 2 that are focusing on depredation, so hopefully have some cool videos. I know Commissioner Bannon, you were interested in seeing some of that, so maybe in the next meeting we'll have some stuff to show you guys. And there's 2 other studies that are happening in the Gulf that are focused on acoustic tagging of red snapper and gag grouper, so we're hoping to have some really good information there on how those fish react to use of descending devices and other release methods. We're also just finished the baseline human dimension survey that's going to help us kind of understand a little bit more about recreational fisheries awareness and knowledge of barotrauma and descending devices and other best practices in the Gulf. We worked with the states in every case to help us build a sample size and really get the survey out to as many recreational reef fish anglers as possible. We set a target for, I think, around 400 per state, and we were able to almost double that. So we got a really, really great sample size, and we're really excited to finalize and have a report published in the next couple months on the baseline survey for that report. And then we'll do a follow-up again in 2024 to kind of measure the differences that we see over time, and as descending devices and barotrauma hopefully become more recognizable and more prevalent in the fishery. We've also been working with the states to collect more information and monitoring regarding descending devices use in the fishery. So we're working with Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida with that Sea Observer programs to add data fields to collect information on when and how often descending devices are used, particularly how many fish are being released in some cases and what species. Florida and Mississippi have programs already established, so they're just kind of revising some of the protocols there with their existing surveys, but we're really excited about Alabama starting their program new, or restarting it, I should say. I think they had one in the past. And then we're also working with the staff to collect some information through the dockside validation surveys as well, so we can really get some information on the private sector's use of fish descending devices. So we're trying to collect a little bit more information there. And then is another big component of the project is outreach and education. So that's kind of where Florida Sea Grant comes in. So we're really working with them to help assist with any of the information that we can regarding the education module, distribution of devices, and just building awareness around return them right and getting the message out about barotrauma and fish descending devices in the Gulf. So some of the next steps we have coming up are just to start collecting data through the at-sea observer programs and the state validation surveys. I'm really excited about that. We'll have that baseline report published hopefully in the next couple months for the human dimension survey that we'll hopefully be able to share with folks in the Gulf. And then we're launching the next phase of Return 'em Right, which is the kind of massive rollout of the education module and distribution of descending devices to recreational anglers who are interested in learning more about barotrauma and fish descending devices. And that's all we've got. You guys have any questions?
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the commission? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have the state director's report, and since we are very close to the adjourn time, I would ask for you to hit highlights if you would, and we'll include all of the director's reports for you to read on your own. We have one report that's not in yet, Florida, but Dave tells me that it will be submitted. So. All right, first would be Alabama.
All right, just a couple of, okay. The couple of quick highlights. Most of our sampling things all went really well this year. You know, met most of the goals throughout the year. And then some of the other programs, such as the Artificial Reef Program, we had $8 million to deploy about 1,700 additional artificial reefs, and we've entered into some contracts to do that. As we mentioned earlier, we already completed the 2 CARES Act packages last year, and got all the tax stuff out for that. Thank you, Jeff. I forgot to mention that. And shellfish, we're still working on developing a hatchery where we have the opportunity to do some spat on shell things, but on our wild harvest this last year, we had a 79-day season, and we harvested 50,000 sacks, which doubled our previous year. So in the last 3 years, we've doubled harvest each year. A lot of that is environmentally driven. Part of it is a change in management style to where we developed a grid system. There are 500 square meters, and we can literally play Tetris to move oyster catchers around on the public reefs. What we found was everybody liked to work one particular area very, very hard, and they would not go work in other areas. So we developed a way, and all we can do is close an entire area, a very large area. So the 500 square meter grids, we move them around 500 meters at a time, and that was the primary reason we were able to double our harvest this year. And we also instituted a recreational harvest tag. We really didn't have any idea of how much recreational harvest we had, and this year we issued 1,177 recreational harvest tags, and that's the equivalent of about 2/3 of a normal commercial sack. So we had never gathered that data previously, so we're adding that to our system. Hopefully not this year, but the next year we'll have an online dashboard where every day you can go to Alabama's website and look at the oyster harvest and see what the times are, how many sacks are being harvested, how many people are out there. We even had record number of harvesters. Mississippi contributed to that by not having a season, so they came to Alabama, but we were glad to do that. Probably resulted in about $4 million to the oyster catchers, to the people on the ground. In our hatchery, we had a release of about 84,000 spotted sea trout and probably about 100,000 flounder for the entire year. And we also have pompano. One of our challenges is to collect broodstock, and what we have found is we've engaged with fishing tournaments and some fishing guides, and we issue them a permit to bring in undersized fish or oversized fish, depending on the species, or exceed the bag limit. And our staff meets them, and we get live fish from them. Not that our staff doesn't enjoy fishing for broodstock, they're just not very good at it. So that's been a big benefit, and people love it. Even people on paid guide trips, when the guide tells them what the fish are going to be used for, they are very enthusiastic to be part of the science. So it's gone really well. And the enforcement folks and the biological staff doing the surveys and the enforcement of the Seafire program has gone pretty well. I think Alabama's enforcement guys have personally met with every federal for-hire boat, and then are to make sure that they're participating, and just had some recent calls that some folks were not, so we're working on that. But our dockside surveys and stuff are going really well. Everybody is super excited about the tablets. That has been a big hit, and then the staff is helping to develop that, where we're going to use it for some other surveys, and so that makes the encounters for the anglers on the water much faster. Much cleaner data comes out of that for sure. There are very few mistakes, and the angler is done much faster. So we'll just give a big shout out to the guys that worked very hard on that program. And I think, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Okay, any questions? All right.
Oh, hey, you can get you one of them shocking boats out there that you can probably get those.
Dan, are you out there in cyberspace?
I am.
He's out there? Okay. Would you like to give a report?
Yeah, I'm probably going to pass until I get it together. I really haven't had time yet. I'm trying to work on it as we speak.
Okay. All right. General Sprague, Mississippi.
Oh, thank you very much. And Mississippi's been pretty busy over the last year. Just to give you an idea, our red snapper, our season opened on the 28th of May, and we opened and closed several times just to assess the stock and where we was at. And we finally closed after 119 days that we had open. And in that time, we were able to harvest 143.0427 pounds. So we was under by our ACL was 151,000, so we was under about 7,000 pounds, 8,000. So it worked out pretty good, and we're getting ready with tails and scales for our 2022 season, and our projected start date is the same time as Memorial Day weekend. Spotted sea trout, we're doing a new assessment on it, and we're shooting for a SPR of 20%, and that's what we're trying to get. We've changed the limits on it several years ago to 15 inches, and we still have 15 fish, but it's worked out pretty good, and I think we're seeing a whole lot of increase, and we're hopefully that'll come out even better when we get this new assessment. Our triple tail, we're tagging. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, so Sports Fish Restoration Program gave us some ability to be able to do that. We were able to tag some fish this year, and we were able to track them. We did catch one of them and then re-tag it. So and we put it out on another one. So it did work. And I tell you, it's kind of amazing to watch how them things go up and down the coast, and all the way to the mouth of Mississippi, and they move back and forth. It's working out very good with the program, and we're going to continue to do this hopefully in 2022. Our southern flounder, we were able to tag some flounders and be able to track them. And right now we've tagged 102 flounders, southern flounders. So we're able to track some of it and be able to look at it and see what we can do as far as the species there. Cobia is a sampling effort, so they're still going on. They've been detected during October and remain detected for nearly 20 days is what they were working on. But it's around Horn Island and Ship Island, and that area is what we're working on with them, and being able to take our fish and be able to track them and see what we're doing after we track them. Oysters, I don't know where they're at. I tell you what, every time I think we've got something going, something else happens. I'm almost convinced that God does not want Mississippi to have oysters. And but it's a point that Bonnie Carey in 2019 wiped us out, and then we tried to rebuild, and obviously didn't have hardly any in 2020 for just a small opening, and in 2021 zero opening. But guess what? We had record rainfall for the massive amount of rainfall, and it wound up killing a lot of the young baby oysters again. So we're fighting hard. We're working every way we can to do that. We opened up another 250 acres of off bottom, so we can work it, and trying to be anything that we can to be able to grow oysters. We're working on some leases, different leases with individuals to be able to do it in some areas that we have. We're looking at an oyster setting facility. We have done a study on it, and we're about to finalize that, and where we would have an oyster setting facility and try to be able to take the larvae from University of Southern Mississippi and be able to use it, and then put it on our shell and put them out in the Gulf. We're trying to find out exactly what that'll work out to be, and hopefully it'll be good. We're culture planting, and then we're culture planting, then we turn around and get rain. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. We're going to keep doing it. The only thing to do is keep trying, and we're going to try every way we can to keep going with it. I could beat you to death over oysters, but I'll get off of it. The shrimp and crab, we had one of my lowest records this year of 5,385,000 pounds head on of all species combined, and as far as shrimp, and that's a little low, but a lot of that's due to the fact of 2019 when it had all the impact on them and having to rebuild. So it's coming back, and I feel strongly that it'll come back further. And also with our landings of crabs was 858,000, and which was a little bit less than normal, but it's getting there, and I think we'll make it. The artificial reefs, we're trying to build them, FH13. Thank you, Noah fought hard with us. Finally got it through the Corps, and to be able to get that, to be able to do the low release there, and now we're working on the high release, and hopefully that'll come through soon, and be able to. It's an area that we had already leased. It had a permit, but they let the permit lapse because it was not with DMR, it was with another company. And now we're able to work some things out and hopefully be able to get some things back working. But we do have some areas that we can release and some new areas that we're working on. Regulatory updates. We currently undergo the process of updating all Title 22 regulations, and we're working with Secretary of State in the format of all the new statutes. And we're trying to get through a legislative session right now. We got 2 more weeks, so hopefully we'll get through that and we'll be able to move forward. We also did do something we started in the last couple of years of port security with Homeland Security. And we're doing port security over Port of Pascagoula and Port of Gulfport. And that is a big thing for us to work with them, and we're able to go out and help guard that area and help be able to do different type of different tests and everything underwater to be able to see if there's anything, if somebody was to bring something in and, and be able to damage the port and do any of this stuff. So it's working out pretty good. But overall, we're holding our head above water. We are doing pretty good right now. And I think that, good Lord willing, and they don't open the Bonnie Carrier this year, then we might have a chance. And, we'll see what we can do, and we'll try hard to do it. And other than that, any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
All right, Jason.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to keep this brief. State's been working on Hurricane Ida impact assessments. As Laura mentioned in her Sea Grant report, the department worked with Louisiana Sea Grant to develop a damage and impact assessment model and report, and that looked at infrastructure damages as well as revenue losses, and as she mentioned, that totaled almost $580 million in losses and damages. We have bi-weekly meetings right now with a Fisheries coalition of industry members, and part of that group's goal is to look at this damage assessment, to develop recommendations on what the industry needs, and put a report together for their lobbying efforts. The department has submitted a final draft of that report to that group for their approval. I'm sure once that gets approved, that'll be made available to the public as well. On the management side, the department's still working with our commission to try to implement some new spotted sea trout regulations. The last time this was brought to the commission, they deferred again for another year and requested that we provide them with bi-monthly updates on how the stock is doing and what our data is showing. So we're in the process of doing that with them. On the flounder side, the commission recently passed a fall closure. So between October 15th and November 30th of this coming year, there will be a commercial and recreational flounder closure to harvest. the department has sort of given up on its desire to implement a long-term flounder tagging program. We simply can't catch enough of them. So we are working on establishing a long-term monitoring program with a specific year for flounder to try and develop some indices of abundance for our stock assessments. We've identified some modified FIKE net designs, and we put in a special order for those. We're hoping to get those soon and start testing those. So that's what we're working on the flounder front. Oysters, we've got a lot of rock in the water recently with some NERDA funding. We've done some culch plants, some traditional culch plants, 200 acres worth, and we've started developing brood reefs. So we put four 10-acre sites in that will be closed to harvest that are meant to serve as broodstock reefs for our public grounds. The oyster hatchery, we lost all of the fall season due to Hurricane Ida. We had a nice spawn and a nice set right before the storm came in, and we were without power for so long down there that everything was gone. And staff were finally able to return. On the Ida side, our lab staff were out of that facility for, I want to say, 2-3 months. And it served as the base camp of operations for the state. So we housed state staff, local fire department, police, National Guard. Our facilities handled the storm very well. So once we got power and water back to it, that became everyone's place to go, whether it was for meals or showers or whatnot. And then the last thing I'll mention is that last year our legislature passed a license restructure for the department. So all of our commercial and recreational licenses were redone and simplified. It had been 40 years since our commercial licenses had been done, and so those price hikes were pretty steep in terms of what they were paying previously, not in terms of it being 40 years, but they were a little sticker shock on that side. Recreational licenses hadn't been updated in 20 years, so those were upped a little bit as well. But like I said, they were simplified, so our license structure is much more user-friendly than it had been in the past. And that'll conclude my report.
All right, thank you. Questions? Yes, sir. Reef.
For your culch plants, are y'all using any different culch material, or what y'all?
It's so for the culch plants themselves, the ones that are meant for harvest, we're using the standard size limestone that we've always used. I think it's 57, so that it can be harvested. On our broodstock reefs, we're using much larger material when possible to prevent harvest. So a dredge, if you're going to pull a dredge along it, you're likely end up losing your dredge. So that's to help with enforcement in terms of that closed area.
Any other questions? Texas, Chris.
So for spotted sea trout, following Winter Storm Uri, which was in February of 2021, a decline in the coastwide catch rate for spotted sea trout was observed in both spring and fall sampling periods as compared to long-term trends from Parks and Wildlife's Fisheries Independent Monitoring Program. Therefore, a temporary 2-year reduction in daily bag limit and size change in the slot limit to help the species recover from the freeze was enacted. The change went into effect yesterday, as a matter of fact, March 16th, and will expire August 31st, 2023. It catches 2 fishing seasons, this summer and next summer. The change is a 3 fish per person bag limit, the minimum size length of 17 inches, a maximum size length of 23 inches, and no fish over 23 inches may be retained. For southern flounder, due to the long-term declining trend in population abundance estimates for southern flounder, recent regulation changes have also been enacted. The minimum size limit for southern flounder was raised from 14 inches to 15 inches in September of 2020, and the season was closed for the first time from November 1st through December 14th in 2021. This to allow to protect flounder migrating to the Gulf. For red snapper, our federal waters adjacent to Texas were closed to the take of red snapper August 5th, 2021, and they are forecasted to reopen summer of 2022. Our state waters were closed on November 15th, 2021, and reopened January 1st, 2022. The Ice Snapper mobile reporting app will continue to be promoted through 2022, and both Texas Parks and Wildlife and Texas A&M University creel surveys will be used to validate reporting in Ice Snapper and for calculating estimates through the non-mandatory reporting system. For oysters, there is a proposal in front of the Commission to close 3 Texas bays to the harvesting of oysters. And that was Mesquite Bay, Carlos Bay, and Ayers Bay, which are small primary and secondary bays on the mid-Texas coast, located between Aransas Bay and San Antonio Bay. Public opinion is currently being sought regarding this proposal, and the proposal will be discussed with the Commission during the next week's March meeting. And as a side note, we expect that to affect approximately 10% of landings in Texas, 10%. Commercial oyster mariculture continues as a developing industry in Texas. And currently there are 3 permitted CALM sites and there are 12 prospective applicants being considered. Oyster reef restoration currently sits at 580 sites, 580 acres restored coastwide. And additionally, the Hurricane Harvey Fisheries Disaster Declaration Grant has funded the restoration of approximately 111 acres, mostly during 2020, 2021. Finally, for oysters, the 2021-22 public oyster harvest season ended prematurely for most areas in Texas, as Fisheries independent sampling documented low abundance of market-size oysters. As of February 2022, Parks and Wildlife had closed 21 of 29 public harvest areas, and the general oyster harvest season generally runs from November 1st through April 30th, so we shortened the season considerably this year. Blue crab trends in Texas remain relatively unchanged from last year's report. Analysis of data suggests that juvenile mortality is increasing, and thus the population is not seeing an overall increase in abundance. However, commercial landings of blue crab in 2021 are only 3% and 8% less than the 10 and 20-year average landings respectively. So while adult populations appear generally stable, the value of blue crab continues on a generally increasing trend. And preliminary data collected during the 2022 abandoned crab trap cleanup documented 250 volunteers participating in about 1,258 derelict crab traps removed from Texas waters. During the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department's 2021 creel survey year, 1,108 surveys were conducted at boat access sites along the coast. For private boat anglers, an estimated 6.1 million man-hours were expended to harvest an estimated 1.6 million fishes. Staff conducted 13,485 target interviews involving 34,902 anglers. Of the 56 species encountered from Texas Bay and estuaries, spotted sea trout, red drum, and Atlantic croaker were the most frequently landed. Of the 41 species encountered from nearshore Gulf state waters, red snapper, king mackerel, and spotted sea trout were the most frequently landed. Of the 36 species encountered in offshore federal Gulf waters, red snapper and king mackerel were the most frequently landed. All 60 vertical longline stations were completed for the Cmap program across all 3 depth strata and over 3 stat zones off of Texas. And out of the 8 different species caught, red snapper made up 90.6% of the catch composition. And finally, during this fiscal year to date, the Saltwater Fisheries Enhancement Program has stocked more than 7.1 million fingerlings into Texas public waters. Species stocked were spotted sea trout, red drum, and southern flounder. And about 10,000 additional southern flounder fingerlings were stocked during the first 2 weeks of March. The stocking will continue with flounder through April. For more information regarding these projects and other items mentioned in this summary report, please see the Texas TCC report. It's got 20 pages of the details.
Thank you, Chris. Questions? Ray?
One quick one. I know we're short on time. The proposed closure of the 3 oyster areas, what's the basis for that? Is it water quality issue or different?
No, sir. The 3 bays are fairly consistent with other bays we have closed in recent history to protect the shallow and sensitive habitats. in those areas. Mesquite Bay, for example, is a bay pass. It has access to the Gulf. So migratory species, we feel that the habitat in that bay is particularly important for a number of different species. These are shallow bays, and we feel like the way the oyster fishery is currently fishing, these smaller bays are very susceptible to overfishing and habitat degradation resulting from the high fishing effort. You know, it's a fairly mobile fishing fleet, so when we close some of these other larger bays due to either low abundance of market oysters or water quality issues such as bacteria blooms, red tide, rainfall, etc., the fleet concentrates in these smaller, historically unfished areas, and they really have a noticeable impact.
Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is future meetings. Nancy?
The October meeting is scheduled. The fall meeting is October 18th through the 20th. Texas is going to be our host state. We haven't picked a location, so if you all have a preference that you want me to check out, just please just let me know and I'll get proposals from those areas.
Yeah, as far as location, I'd like to suggest to the committee that we discuss that for just a second and talk about a first and second option that has to do with convenience and desirability. So I've talked to Robin and to Chris, and they're thinking Galveston is a first choice. I'd just like to get feedback on that and then talk about a possible second location in case logistics doesn't permit Galveston. What's the committee think? Great.
I thought the San Antonio location was nice and convenient. It was, you know, pretty much there, centralized on the river walk. So, you know, I'd toss that out there as an alternative.
Okay. Anybody else?
So, Dave, you don't want to go back to Brownsville and South Padre? I just got a text from Dan Eleanor, and in capital letters it was no Brownsville. So I think that's a no. Come on, Dan, you remember the 100-mile Uber drive or Uber ride? So
I will never be
It was
going.
only a $200 Uber ride. You know, the only other thing I would say with Galveston is it going to be easy to get in and out airlines.
That's one of the issues with Galveston is that if you can get into Hobby Airport, it's about 45 minutes. If you've got to go to Bush, it's about an hour and 45 minutes across town. So that's one of the considerations.
The reason I asked that is I just noticed in the last week the airlines have almost doubled in prices, and so I don't know what.
Any other comments? Oh, I'm sorry.
You know, I was going to say I don't know why I kind of know why we feel like we're restricted to coastal cities, but I mean, San Antonio is not coastal in my book. I mean, Dallas and Austin would be fine with me, and Dallas particularly is a whole lot easier to get in and out of.
Okay, anybody else? Chris, you have any comments?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Nancy? You got it from here on? Okay. Dave, any issues, other issues?
Yeah, a couple of things. Since we've had two meetings for the 30+ years I've been with the commission, I actually included the March 2023 meeting location, which will be in Louisiana, but it won't be in March. It'll actually be October 17th through the 19th. I'll make sure the next agenda includes that. And to that point, before COVID, we were actually talking about going to one meeting per year, and we were going to test it out, and then COVID hit, and we really hadn't been able to do it. So with going to one meeting a year, the commission is now paying for travel for all the commissioners, and we've expanded the TA encourage attendees to attend at least, if not all, but most of the meeting. And what that does is it frees up time for this meeting to be, we won't have a lot of presentations. We're just kind of conducting the business of the commission. The presentations will be at TCC and the general session and the other committees. And if everyone's attending there, God dog it, everyone's attending there that all week, they get to see those, and we're not doing that. But so, however, if we do go to one meeting, I think we need to take some formal action to say, yes, the commission is moving to one meeting. And if we do that, then we need to also talk about election of officers. With 2 meetings, the suite of officers would serve for 2 meetings. If we only went to 1 meeting a year, it would they would only serve for 1 meeting, and we might want to consider electing officers every other year. But I think a motion to move the commission to 1 meeting a year would be useful, or at least having a discussion of that to make sure everyone's is okay with that. So.
All right, General.
Yeah, I mean, you know, obviously 1 meeting sounds great to me, but you know, you only have to do it. But I don't know, since things are coming back, is it going to be able? Are they going to be able to actually, the groups get together enough to be able to make that work? To where I seem that they get a lot of information, you know, when they come and meet together, and when they sit down with each other, they seem to get a whole lot of information. And I'm just curious about that. And you know, I believe me, 1 meeting I don't have to go to is something great, but just a thought. You know, I know what it just seems to be that everybody works pretty hard in these meetings, and I really seem to get a lot of information out of it.
Yes, sir. Well, I mean, we've talked about it with the staff that I think a lot of these subcommittees are still going to continue to meet. They just won't meet during that you know, that March timeframe. They'll meet throughout the year at different times as they deem necessary. And we still have the travel funds for those committees and subcommittees to meet to be able to do that. So we're not going to stop doing that. It's just going to be the full commission.
Well, that answers that. As long as they're getting what they, you know, that's good.
Other comments, Jason?
Just a quick question. I know right now we have some subcommittees that only meet at either the March or the October meeting, and some of those subcommittees have the same people on them. But we're going to be able to work out, or I guess, is it going to be able to fit in the normal 3-day schedule that we currently hold?
And that's one of the things that we are looking at, that potentially, instead of starting on Tuesday morning, we might have to start Monday afternoon to accommodate some of these, because we might have, for example, Artificial Reef has been talking about, they usually meet outside our meeting, but if we go 1-to-1 meeting a year, they might be meeting with us, which would be, I think, would be beneficial. So yeah, we might have to start Monday afternoon. So and then finish up. The plan would be subcommittee meetings on Tuesday, potentially Monday afternoon, TCC all day with the general session and the business meeting. And then on Thursday morning, we'd have state federal would meet in the morning from 8:30 to 10. We take a break. Commission would start at 11. We'd have our luncheon and then finish up in the afternoon on Thursday. And depending on where we're at, people could get home Thursday afternoon or fly home Friday morning. So that's right now our plan on moving forward with the 1 meeting per year. But I can't, and I guess it would also depend on if there were issues that other committees needed to meet, we might end up going into Friday morning or something, but we'll have the flexibility to do that as we proceed.
Scott?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that about like maybe on a Monday or something, Dave, because I did have a little concern about some of the, we jammed a lot of meetings in this one, and we were all, as commissioners, we were moving between different meetings. And so if there's the potential to maybe start at midday on Monday or something to add, and then kind of relieve some of that double teaming during the week. And again, some of the committees have some of the same people. And I wouldn't be opposed. I said, if you're going to go to 1 meeting, if you start either on that Monday, and you want to try not to creep into that Friday, but I think that would be an option again instead of traveling twice a year. And I'm supportive of going to the one meeting, especially as the general pointed out that the committees can still meet during the year at their convenience. And again, that helps with some of them that are doubled up on things as well. So do I need to go ahead and, does anybody else have a comment? If not, I'll make the motion.
We have one of the Reed comment.
So we had talked at one time about doing the spring meeting virtual and then doing the fall meeting in person. So this would do away with the spring meeting, but we could potentially still hold that traditional week for subcommittee meetings as needed, or just free them up to do whatever they need throughout the year.
I think we would free the subcommittees up to meet whenever they wanted to. And in terms of the virtual meeting, I talked with the chairman a little bit the other day that I think if there were issues that the commission needed to address, I think we could do that via the executive committee. And so probably in the 1st of February, I would send an email out to the executive committee saying, hey, we're coming up on March. Are there any issues that we need to address and handle it that way? And then the executive committee would report at the October meeting. So, and actually, if you look at our bylaws, the executive committee can meet at any point outside our annual meeting. So if there's an issue that needs to come up, I'll call an executive committee meeting. We usually do it virtually, but we could do it in person if we needed to.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, let's entertain a motion based on Executive Director's recommendation to go to one meeting per year and subcommittee meetings throughout the year.
I mean, I'll take a stab at it. It may take all of us to make it work out, but so that the motion be that the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission move to one, I guess you call it general meeting in the fall of each year. In addition, subcommittees may meet at their discretion anytime during the year. All right, I always use the expression I vomit on the table and then we got to pick out the good chunks. So y'all find the good chunks.
Scott. Do we need to say anything about the executive committee meeting?
No.
That's
Part of our bylaws.
I'd second that if you needed that. I think it's okay. It's pretty much tells what it is. You did a good job.
All right. We have the motion on the board. It's been moved and seconded. Questions, comments? Dave? Oh, I'm sorry, Chris.
Is this a change to our bylaws? Or is there anything in the bylaws that stipulates 2 meetings a year?
It's a change in our rules and regulation document. We would have to amend those documents, and that was going to be my comment, that we put something in that we modify our rules and regulations document and that be approved at the October meeting.
Is that in a general operating procedures?
Yeah, it's our rules and regulation document.
Okay, that's the term.
So do we do that through the executive?
We could just do that at the October meeting.
Any further comments?
Do you need that in the motion, or do we just ask staff to make those changes for presentation in October?
Well, I think we should include it. I've got a couple of editorial things, Scott, with the motion. I would say in a general meeting in October of each year, and then also add committees and subcommittees may meet, because we have several committees that might need to meet. And then I guess that can be part of the discussion. I don't know that we need that we will amend the rules and regulations document and present that. I think that can just be part of the discussion. I don't know that it needs to be the motion. I think, but Chris seems to have some consternation there.
Chris.
There's just some, I fear unintended consequences, and this is a minor thing probably, but just as a for instance, we typically nominate the Lyle Simpson Award winner in the spring, at the spring meeting. Isn't that right? Or do we, and so we're not this time, but would the executive committee then be charged with coming up with that person? And is that what your thought is?
What we would do is at each October meeting, we would nominate the person for the following year. So.
And we already have 2 on the slate for October anyway.
Other comments?
And Chris, to that point, we can try this, and if we do it for a year or 2 and say this is just not working, we can always go back. It's not like this is. We can easily amend that rules and regulations document again. So.
General. Yeah, Scott, do you have to agree to that or something and then we can?
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement with that, the seconder.
And my second's good.
All right, so Scott moved and is okay with the changes, and General Spragan's seconder is okay. Any further discussions? All right, let's do a show of hands on this one, since it's kind of an important move, and we're going to be modifying other parts of the documents. So all in favor, please raise your hand. All right. All opposed, same sign.
Do we need to? Yeah, I'm sorry. Check with Dan online.
No, that's what I was going to do.
Yeah.
I'm
Raise your hand, Dan.
I'm raising
it. and Senator Luno as well.
Hey.
My hand's raised.
Okay.
All right. Motion passes, and I just want to say that I didn't enter into the discussion. I'm concerned that moving to 1 meeting a year is going to be a lot like not having a meeting. And I know we can have the executive committee. I'm not big on virtual meetings. I've had to do them in several instances for several different boards I'm on over the past 2 years, and you just don't get the discussion, you don't get the interaction, you don't get the camaraderie. So I think this is a good test. I want to support Dave in it, but if the commission finds out it doesn't work as well as we thought, I think we would need to entertain a change back to 2 meetings a year. Just my comment. Reef.
And to that point, I would encourage the staff, if you're going to be making changes to rules and regulations, to leave those changes as open-ended, to where the commission can meet at its discretion as determined during what meeting, as opposed to having to go back and forth and change the rules and regulations. I mean, they're there for a reason, but don't make it overly cumbersome.
Noted. Staff note that.
Jay Luno,
Okay.
This is Jay Luno. Can I add something in too? I am concerned as well about that, because if that meeting is scheduled at a time when you have a conflict such as this one is with me and being in session in the Senate, and I cannot attend it virtually, I mean, you either attend virtually or you don't attend at all. So that's a concern of mine as well. But however, I'm too willing to give it a chance.
Okay, thank you. General?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and we got 6 months. We can sit here and reel on this before we have our next meeting. So if we have any issues, we can sit back and talk about it and come.
And I would ask staff, Dave and staff, to really think through this during this next 6 months, and any obstacles you see, get with the executive committee so that we can hash those out, make it as smooth a transition as possible. So
Well, if you recall, we actually talked about, we talked about moving forward at the March 2020 meeting to do this. So we've had 2 years to think about it, and I believe we've worked out a lot of the details, but yeah, we will continue to do that.
Okay, with that approval, the second portion of Dave's comments had to do with election of officers. So Dave, I'll let you go back and talk about that.
Yeah, I just think that having the officers serve only one meeting a year is it doesn't really give them the opportunity to take full advantage of running and being part of the officers of the commission. So I would recommend that we select, or we allow the suite of officers to serve for 2 meetings, which would mean we would have elections every other year. Again, I believe there's a language in the rules and regulations, but I'm not sure there's a time frame on it. I'll have to look on that, but we may have, if we do make that change, we would have to we might have to amend the rules and regs as well for that, but that would be my recommendation.
Okay, Dave, do you think we need to do that at this meeting, or do you want to propose that in October? Or you just want to have general discussion, or you want to have a motion?
I guess we can. Yeah, it might be better just to do it in October when we're actually scheduled to select officers, and we can have, prior to doing that, we can have a discussion.
Well, I'm not asking you to change what you're thinking. I'm just asking the question.
Well, I think this will give people time. It'll give people 6 months to think about it and potential pitfalls of going to every other year. So,
okay. Questions, comments? General?
Yeah, I agree to a point, but I tell you what, a lot of us don't want 1 year to get it. And, you know, it's not just one meeting, it's a whole year. And, you know, if you look at it that way, it's a whole year. It's not just one meeting. And also, you know, you never know about the changes and everything else. If you have that, we were lucky to have done with, you know, last year we all virtual and didn't have any meetings, and it was very, but this year, you know, we're able to do this. But I don't know. I just personally, you know, I like the 1 year, but we can talk about it later, and I'll just back off.
Any other comments? If you have any questions about that concept, get hold of Dave. Give him your ideas. Okay. Yeah, my question to Dave the other day was, normally what we've tried to do is have the chairman from the state where we have the meeting, just to keep some continuity in that. I don't know if it's necessary, but that would go away if you have a person with a 2-year term and we rotate every year. We could have 2 meetings in South Padre every year.
Sorry.
You're breaking up, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. We're running late, so I need to be quiet here. All right, Dave. Next agenda item.
Yes, sir. In your briefing book, each meeting we provide a list of the committee listings by state for all the committees, active committees of the commission. All we ask is that you review those and provide any changes or updates to. You can email me, email them and send them to me. It doesn't need to be a formal letter, but just if you want to change membership on any or all of the committees for your state, please just let me know, and you can do that at any point in time. So.
Okay, you've got the next 2.
Yeah, and then the last agenda item before other business is a list of publications and web statistics. They're in your briefing book. It's strictly informational. If you have any comments or questions about it, I'll be glad to try and answer them. But if not, we can move on to other business.
All right, no questions, other business, Dave?
So the last issue is about, it's a travel issue about travel insurance. Historically, the commission has not reimbursed for travel insurance. We looked at the travel guideline and it's actually not explicitly mentioned in there, but in my 30 years, we've never done that. There are several agencies that have started doing that. So I did some research, and in the 30 plus years I've been here, there was been only one instance where having insurance would have been beneficial, where we would have saved money. And all the travel that we pay for all the people, it seems like paying for the insurance, it seems like it wouldn't be worth doing that, because if we don't have insurance, the traveler would get would still get reimbursed for his or her ticket, and they would have a year to utilize it. And there was one instance where it was past a year, and we would have lost the cost of the ticket. But every other time that we've done it, it doesn't happen all that often, but when it has happened, they've always traveled within the year and been able to use that credit for flying on the commission. So I would recommend that we continue not to reimburse for travel insurance, and that we actually explicitly list it in our travel guidelines. So, but that's just my recommendation.
Any comments, General?
Yeah, I'm the one that brought this up to him. So the issue is, you know, I don't know. I can tell you right now, it's just like what we're doing. You can figure out this a couple of ways. You could say that, all right, if I turn around and you give me, we're having a trip this month in October, and if we buy the ticket now and we put travel insurance on it, it'll cost you like $20 to put travel in, $25. If I wait till November to September and buy it, it's going to cost you about $200 or $300 more than it would have cost you now to buy the ticket probably. So where are you saving? The point is, if a person, and this is what we're finding in the agency in a lot of places, that people are waiting till the last minute to buy a ticket, and it's costing you a lot more money because they said we're not going to do it because we could not get insurance against it. And I would even look at refundable, because it's like $100 to buy one, you know, to add the $100 for a refundable ticket. And I think this is something that Gulf States has gone to, Gulf Council, have gone to, and they're allowing this. I think it's something you ought to look at hard. The situation is, it would be different if you're buying a ticket. So what, you know, we won't just turn and say, okay, Gulf States, you buy the ticket. You know, you do it whenever we do the hotels a lot of times, you know. But the point I'm getting at is it would be different if you were looking at Gulf States, but you can't do that because then you got individuals that you buy a ticket for, and that's not something you work on. But I just think that we ought to look at it because, you know, I'm going to tell my people not to buy a ticket till the last minute if they're going to have to be, if there's a chance it's going to be canceled. And that's going to cost you double or triple the money.
Well, I mean, in the guidelines, we ask that people
2 weeks.
Don't wait to the last minute to purchase tickets. So I mean, I don't want you buying your tickets for the October meeting, but when we send the travel authorizations, we expect people to make their reservations then. But we can certainly look at it.
I mean, if it's feasible, I guess the biggest thing, once we get past some of this stuff in America right now and we get back on common sense terms, I could understand that, but I don't think we're there. And I don't think we're going to be there for another year or two. And that's what my question is. I mean, I'm looking at it. That's just like now I have to sign waivers every day for people to be able to buy a plane ticket because they didn't buy it a month ago and they're not flying till June. And then they go and buy a ticket and it's over double. And you have to sign a waiver every day for it. And but when you're asking individuals to buy that ticket, then they're the ones holding it. They're gonna have to hold it. If they buy it on their own credit card or whatever, they're gonna hold it for a whole year or what? You know, maybe they don't want to travel any other way. And then Gulf State's not gonna reimburse them for it.
Yeah, actually, we would.
If you're gonna buy that, you're gonna give them the money and then let them fly with somebody and not come to this meeting?
No, they would have to use it they would have to use that credit to travel on the commission, but that's how it, if you're flying to this meeting and you purchase a ticket and you cancel, and you had to cancel it, and your ticket was $300, we would pay you that $300. You would have that $300 credit, and you would have a year to utilize it again for traveling on the commission.
So you're gonna pay me the $300 and then it's up to me. What if I leave the agency?
Well, I mean, in the 30 plus years that
I'm just trying to.
It's happened one time where the commission has had to eat the ticket. So
Yeah.
just to me, it doesn't seem like it's worth buying the insurance.
It's something that we're doing and we're seeing more and more in every agency that we talk to now. It's the same reason Gulf Council did it. Is they looked at it too and they said, wait, there's a lot of things happening with what's going on. And I feel like if we could ever get past something, even if we did it on a temporary time from hereafter, then I did it temporarily to see what happened. It might save the agency money. That's the only thing I'm looking at. I mean, I'm not in it to make money. I'm in it to save money.
Reed?
So can we just ask staff to present something at the fall meeting, maybe look at, 4 to 5 year average before COVID, what that would have related to in terms of travel funds? Okay.
Yeah, in the essence of time, since we're way over, I'd like to ask Dave to continue this discussion with whoever wants to have the discussion offline, and then we'll talk about it again in the commission meeting. All right, Dave, anything else? Other business?
That is it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Anybody else, other business? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. And I think I got a second somewhere in there. All right. Thank everyone for attending. Thank the agencies for coming, and staff, thank you for a great meeting. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We are adjourned. I'll do the official.
Thank you, everyone.